across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good evening to you and welcome to The Late Show. No, I'm afraid I'm not Petrie Hosken, but it's indeed Phil Dave here instead, in for the marvellous Petrie Hosken with you until 1 o'clock tomorrow morning. Now, coming up on this evening, we're going to look into some of the big stories of the day, and we're going to, of course, discuss what I actually believe will prove to be really quite an historic day in the world of politics. Could this really be the beginning of the end for Sir Keir Starmer? Well, I'm afraid our esteemed excuse of a leader has accused Whitehall officials of deliberately covering up after it emerged that he was never told about Lord Mandelson failing top-level security checks for the role of the US ambassador. How much trust do you have in our Prime Minister? That's what we will be discussing throughout the show this evening. It's 0344 499 1000. Do get in touch and let me know your thoughts. We'll also be unpicking the story that frankly is, I think, extraordinarily disturbing because detectives have been questioning two teenagers over a firebomb attack on a North London synagogue. Now, this comes amid warnings that foreign states are actually recruiting, if you like, thugs for hire to carry out a campaign of racist violence towards the Jewish community. Is the capital, or indeed this country, no longer safe for Jewish people? 0344 499 1000. And this comes on the day that a London Underground driver has been suspended after he was filmed at a protest telling a member of the public that Jewish passengers are, quote, not safe when he is driving his train. Journalist and broadcaster Jonathan Sacerdotti will join me to discuss that. At 11 o'clock this evening, we are going to have a look at Tuesday's front pages, and I'm going to be joined by a new voice here on Talk, Elliot Heilpern, who is a political and economics commentator. Trust me when I say this, you're going to love what Elliot has to say, so you absolutely don't want to miss that. Now, at midnight tonight, Petrie might be away, but it's still Talkback, and there is a chance for you to have your say. Now, just because Petrie takes a well-earned week off, it doesn't mean that things have to change that dramatically. Of course, it is a whole hour dedicated to you and your comments, because, as you must know by now, here at Talk, your opinion most certainly matters. And I want to hear what you think about what we have witnessed today in the so-called home of democracy. Our Prime Minister, the person who we are supposed to look up to as some sort of leader of our once great country, I believe is looking more and more disgraced by the day. How do you feel about how he has dealt with the whole Mandelson saga? How much trust do you have in Sir Keir Starmer? 0344 499 1000. Do get your calls in nice and early, and we'll be sure to have a chat a little later on. Let's spend what's left of Monday evening together. Stick with me here on Talk. Speaking of get your opinion in nice and early, by the way, just a quick reminder of how you can share your opinions. There's loads of ways to get in touch. You can, of course, you can call 0344 499 1000. You can also text us on 87222. Make sure that you start your message with the word talk, because if you don't, it disappears off into the ether and we might never see it, and that would be a total waste. You can also tweet us at talkTV, and of course you can send us a WhatsApp on 0344 499 1000. So there are loads of ways to get in touch, and I absolutely hope you would do just that. Right. Sir Keir Starmer this afternoon accused Foreign Office officials of a deliberate cover-up after it emerged Lord Mandelson failed top-level security checks before his appointment as US ambassador. The Prime Minister told MPs it was staggering that he was never informed that the vetting had been rejected. He claims that the decision to withhold the files was an intentional act by the civil service. Well, the row will intensify tomorrow when the former top official, Sir Ollie Robbins, will face a public grilling over why the recommendation was overruled in secret. It's been a very hectic and momentous day in Parliament, so let's look at exactly what happened. I'm delighted to say that political correspondent Joanna Bell joins me now to discuss this. A very good evening to you, Joanna.
Good evening, Phil. How are you today?
I am agog, to be honest with you. I am truly, completely and utterly mind blown, I think is the only way I can describe it. I simply can't believe that our Parliament has gone through what it's gone through today. You know, I think people underplay it. I think people are so used to the circus now that they're almost no longer shocked when nonsense like this happens. But make no mistake, it is shocking nonsense.
Well, people were absolutely incredulous watching today's session with Keir Starmer. He acted as if he was some babe in the woods who had no idea what was going on. And, you know, people are just incredulous that the Prime Minister is feigning this, ignorance over something so serious. And Diane Abbott made a point when she said, you know, you could have done a cursory Google search about Mandelson and, you know, made sure that fundamentally he'd passed the vetting process. He stood up and said in the Commons that Mandelson had, you know, gone through the due process to become the ambassador. And that turned out to be false.
Well, I mean, apart from anything, I think also that earlier it was David Maddox was on the Breakfast Show, I believe, this morning, and he was the one who I think broke it in The Independent, saying about questionable status surrounding Mandelson. It makes you wonder, does the Prime Minister never read a newspaper? Does he not know what goes on in the news?
I mean, come on. He was, you know, the Director of Public Prosecutions. If anybody believes that he wouldn't ask questions about this appointment, you know, they're just completely naive. And, you know, is it the dog wagging the tail or the tail wagging the dog? The fact that he didn't know and didn't make it his business to know shows that he's not fit for the job and that he's incompetent.
Yeah.
I mean, even without the vetting process, Mandelson should never have been put up for that appointment in the first place. Well, and,
yeah, I know. So apart from what I was going to say, I mean, it sort of suggests that before he was appointed that he was somehow squeaky clean. And to tell you the truth, I think there are plenty of people who have long been, at the very least, suspicious of things that Mandelson, and not just him, I mean his cronies as well, but they weren't going up for the role of US ambassador. Just why? It just doesn't make sense to me that he would even contemplate that he was a good choice.
Well, the talk is that Starmer thought he was being clever, matching a disreputable ambassador to a disreputable president. But, you know, it's massively backfired on him. You know, he's had to resign twice from the Labour government, and also now he's had to resign for the third time for his relations with a convicted paedophile, Jeffrey Epstein. So it's very embarrassing because I think people voted for Starmer because, you know, they knew he was boring, but they thought he was competent and honest. And now they've suddenly realized he's only two of those things.
Yeah. Well, totally. Apart from anything, I believe that sort of a lot of people, I say a lot of people, it wasn't a lot of people at all. Of course, the actual voting turnout was something like 34% of the last general election in 2024. But I think that so many people were moved to vote Labour just because they were so desperate to get rid of the political elite that we had become accustomed to under the previous Tory government, who just, let's be honest, seemed to do a pretty bad job. And yet, just when you thought things couldn't get any worse, oh, good grief, they seem to have got an awful lot worse.
Well, this is the thing, and they really have. I mean, he had a 180-seat majority, and, you know, he's absolutely just, you know, his credibility has been ripped to shreds. The fact that he's throwing every single person under the bus in his cap, it's just, you know, he just looks like a coward. And I suspect Labour are keeping him in till the May elections so that he can take the hit when they're trounced, basically.
Yeah, but there are some people who say that. But at the same time, I kind of don't get the impression that Starmer's the sort of person who's just going to walk away. He has wanted the top job for a very, very long time. And now he's got it. Is he really going to give it up that easily? Whether or not it's the right thing to do, I just refuse to believe that he's going to be in the least bit tempted to say, oh, do you know what? I made a terrible mistake here. For the sake of the country, I'm going to fall on my sword. I don't buy it. I don't think he will.
Well, you know, he's in favor with his backbenchers because he, you know, stood up to Trump. He didn't get involved in Trump's war. And so, you know, that's curried a lot of favor for him. But as you saw today in the session in the Commons, that, you know, his backbenchers were going up against him. Emily Thornberry stood up and said she warned him beforehand. You know, John McDonnell said he's taken the Labour Party into disrepute. You know, Diane Abbott said that, you know, the public do not care about policy, or, you know, they care about why did you not just Google him and make a decision about this guy's character, you know, which everybody knew. I mean, he's not called the Prince of Darkness for nothing, right? It just beggars belief that he could allow this to happen on his watch. And the fact that he's not taking responsibility for it and blaming Ollie Robbins, even though Ollie Robbins started his job after Mandelson was appointed, as far as I know, you know, it's absolutely disgraceful.
But he lets everyone take the blame for him. I mean, look at what happened with Morgan McSweeney. You know, it's clearly that is the kind of individual that Starmer is. You know, he just doesn't seem to recognise when there's wrong, and if there is any wrongdoing in his party, he would say straight away, oh, don't look at me, I didn't know a thing. Well, how can you not know? You're the Prime Minister, for crying out loud. You're the leader of the Labour Party. How do you not know what is going on within your own party? Because, to be honest, that doesn't show him in a good light either.
Well, exactly. He just looks like a coward. He's throwing everybody under the bus. And somebody said today in the comments, you know, you won't have any more buses to throw anyone under. You know, you've thrown so many people under them. And it's just, you know, he needs to take responsibility for the fact that he overlooked this vetting process, and he did lie to the Commons. And, you know, people are saying, well, Boris Johnson, you know, got thrown out for something less, you know, so why is he getting away with it?
Well, to be honest, it's because I think that we know the answer to that. It's primarily because the Tories act in totally the opposite way, where they are the ones who are normally very quick to get rid of a leader if they believe that leader is going to be detrimental towards their polling. Yet Labour seems to have a reputation of hanging on. You only have to look at how long Tony Blair clung on to power for. You know, in spite of the old war that he dragged us all into, he's absolutely managed to stay there and just managed to lead us right into a path laced with Gordon Brown's awful policies. So, and to be honest with you, I'm not in the least bit surprised. And that's why, as much as I understand why people think that Starmer will be a goner before long, I'm not convinced by that, just because of the reputation that precedes Labour. I tell you what, I think that what we should do, though, is, Joanna, if you stick there just for a second, because should we remind ourselves of what Starmer, or how Starmer has reacted to some of the day's proceedings? Let's hear what he had to say for himself in the Commons earlier today.
The Foreign Office officials granted him developed vetting clearance against the specific recommendation of the United Kingdom Security Vetting that developed vetting clearance should be denied. Not only that, the Foreign Office officials who made that decision did not pass this information to me, to the Foreign Secretary, to her predecessor, the Deputy Prime Minister, to any other minister, or even to the former Cabinet Secretary, Sir Chris Wormold. I found this staggering, and therefore last Tuesday I immediately instructed officials in Downing Street and the Cabinet Office to urgently establish the facts on my authority. I wanted to know who made the decision, on what basis.
Well, if you don't know, Prime Minister, how are any of us going to find out? That's what I'd like to know. Joanna Bell, political commentator, is still with us and reacting to that. And Joanna, it's just even, I can't... Look, I want to believe what he says. I will be bold enough to say that. I really want to believe what he says. But I can't. I don't believe him.
Well, it's not even whether you believe him or not. It's that that Mandelson was even considered to be fit for the role in the first place. You know, he came into Washington, D.C. with baggage, and, you know, he was a ticking time bomb. So why it just doesn't make sense. What Keir Starmer is saying doesn't make any sense, because he was warned that this was not a suitable appointment. I mean, typically ambassadors are people of good character, you know, who are, you know, safe.
Well, for goodness sake, they're supposed to be a representative of the whole country.
Right.
I mean, that is quite a responsibility. And
well, exactly. So
I mean, I don't know about you, but I even remember at the time thinking of when Mandelson was appointed, I actually genuinely thought, do you know how sometimes we obviously live in a day and age where there's a bit of fake news out there. Sometimes people can get things slightly wrong and misunderstand what has been said. We're all guilty of it. But I genuinely thought it was a mistake. And I don't mean a mistake as in Starmer had made a mistake. I thought the journalists had got it wrong. That they no, I said that can't be. They can't. Why would they appoint Mandelson?
But this is the thing. Everybody thought it stank. I mean, the whole thing was ridiculous that he would ever even be considered, and yet he was shoehorned into that role and embarrassed. And Keir Starmer is an international embarrassment as a result. I mean, Mandelson was pictured in his underpants in the Jeffrey Epstein files.
Thanks. I'd just forgotten that. Why do you remind me of that image? I'd forgotten that, Joanna.
But, you know, ambassadors are meant to be, you know, people of good character. And as we've seen in years gone by, that Mandelson is someone of very poor character and was not fit for the role. And for that reason alone, Keir should resign, because regardless of whether he failed the vetting process, he should never have been considered for that role in the first place.
Well, at the very least, you know, I would think he would have the backbone to turn around and say, well, I wouldn't think, I would like to think. He has the backbone to turn around and say, do you know what? I got it wrong. I'm really, really sorry. I made a terrible mistake. I was blinded by my loyalty to certain people in this party, and I shouldn't have done it. And I'm really sorry. I will work to rebuild it. But nothing, none of that. All he is doing is trying to dig himself out constantly of this very, very deep hole he finds himself in. And I genuinely, as much as I don't think he's going anywhere, I truly don't see how he can survive, because how will anyone believe what he has to say or take him seriously again?
Well, this is the thing, but at the minute, who can replace him? I mean, there was talk of Angela Rayner, but she can't because she's under investigation. So, you know, they're going to let him take the fall. I think he'll be blamed for the huge defeat in May, and that will give his backbenchers the impetus to topple him, potentially. And, you know, that's the only thing that I think he has bought himself a bit of time. But as the investigation continues, more information about this process will come to light, and why Mandelson failed the vetting process. So we should have more answers. And tomorrow, I think Ollie Robbins is from 9 a.m., I believe. He's been questioned. So maybe we'll get more answers, and maybe before the week's end, Keir's position will be untenable. But the problem is, who will take his place?
And that's, do you know, that's probably the most terrifying thing, because to tell you the truth, I'm genuinely trying to think of anyone who's in a top position in government who I would be remotely comfortable with the prospect of being the next Prime Minister. And we mustn't forget that regardless of who it is, automatically David Lammy will be that person potentially whilst we are waiting for the successor to be announced.
But that's a terrifying prospect.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, I must admit, for that reason alone, I hope Starmer doesn't go anywhere. But there are plenty of reasons why I hope he doesn't go anywhere, because to be honest with you, for as long as he's in power, I think it means that people are finally starting to see why so many were dubious about Starmer and his cronies coming to power in the first place. So I just don't... I don't know how this plays out. I genuinely don't remember, in all the time that I have been focusing my working life on news and politics and always being fascinated by what comes out of the Commons, I truly don't ever remember a time as messed up, and I nearly wanted to say something else there, as this.
Yeah, I mean, look, like I said earlier, everybody thought that Keir Starmer was competent and honest. And, you know, it turns out he's neither of those things, and he's not even running the government. He doesn't know what's going on in his own government, and that's terrifying as well. So, you know, for those reasons, he should resign.
Yeah.
But he's not going to do that. He's going to hang on in there until this. But today I noticed he was very somber, despondent even. And, you know, the MPs kept asking him the same questions because he wasn't really answering them.
I was going to say he never answers questions. I genuinely don't know why Understand we even bother having Prime Minister's questions, because he will never ever answer. He always deflects. Always deflects.
Always. And, you know, you had Lee Anderson, like, in a very brusque way, calling him a liar. And he then got ejected from the chamber.
Now, but hang on a second, actually, because really quickly, because unfortunately I'm running out of time and I do have to let you go. But I will say this, as much as I understand why Lee Anderson felt moved to say that, there are rules and regulations in Parliament in terms of the words that you can and can't use in the chamber. And as much as I understand why Lee Anderson would be moved to feel the need to call the Prime Minister that, you can't do that. So I personally think he shouldn't have. And it was technically the right course of action to throw him out of the Commons.
But then another one called him a dissembler, which means the same thing, and he was allowed to stay. So, you know, basically everybody's calling him in a roundabout way a liar. And, you know, that's seemingly what he is. But we'll find out more tomorrow when we hear from Ollie Robbins.
I dare say we will, and I don't know whether or not we'll even want to hear what we're going to hear. But in the meantime, Joanna Bell, political correspondent, huge thank you for trying to help us dissect some of the bizarre scenes that we witnessed in Parliament today. Right, coming up in just a moment's time, we'll read out some of your messages that have already started to come in, but do join the conversation. How much trust do you have in Sir Keir Starmer? I know we've been talking about this a lot today on Talk, but if you haven't had your chance to say it, go ahead. Give me a call, 0344 499 1000. It's Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken with you until 1 a.m. tomorrow. Your opinion matters. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. It's Phil Dave with you until 1 o'clock tomorrow morning here on the home of common sense. And sadly, I don't think common and sense, or at least commons and sense, are two words that you're going to hear in the same sentence too much at the moment, because today in Parliament, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer went up against MPs questioning him on what he knew and what he didn't know about the appointment of Peter Mandelson as the US ambassador. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not entirely sure after a whole day of this that we know much more than when the day started, because regrettably that does appear to be the way in which Mr Starmer goes about conducting himself, is that he will obfuscate, he will deflect, and he will always try and blame someone else for the misgivings that we're unfortunate enough to witness him carry out. This is the man who is our Prime Minister. This is the man who is supposed to lead our once great nation, and the person who we are supposed to look up to with, dare I say, an element of reverence. For goodness sake, he's the Prime Minister. That's what he should be. But he's far from it, let's be honest. And I personally cannot get my head around the fact that we are even in this position. When I was speaking to Alex Phillips before, and I was saying about how this country is supposed to be the envy of the world when it comes to democracy, and when it comes to the idea that we live in the most free society that there is, I think we've always had somewhere at the back of our minds that politicians lie a bit here and there. Certainly, as long as I can remember, it's always been the running joke that politicians lie to get to where they are. But I don't ever remember a situation as disturbing as this. Now, you could say I'm being really dramatic, but I tell you why this is disturbing, is because, yes, we know prime ministers have been caught up in scandal before, and they have faced questions before, and they have absolutely been held to task before. They've even fallen on their sword before. But I just can't get my head around the fact that Starmer and, frankly, most politicians in this day and age, I'm not even going to be party specific here for the moment because I don't think it is a party thing. I believe most politicians believe that you and I are stupid. I really, really believe that. I think that is the reason why they behave the way they do. I think that is the reason why that they come out with some of the rubbish they do. It's they just think that we are too stupid to see them for what they are. And they are in it for themselves. Now, I could be wrong. I hope I am, but I don't think I am. But I do want to know whether or not, am I the only one who thinks this? What do you think? Maybe you also believe that there is something fundamentally not right with our political class at the moment, and in particular with our Prime Minister. If that is the case, I want to hear from you. Do give us a call. 0344 499 1000. Get your say in, because that is what we're going to, after midnight tonight, it's Talkback. We're going to have a chat, you and I. The whole hour is dedicated to you and your opinion. So get in touch, have your say, and I would love to hear what you think. How much trust do you have in the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer? Let's read some of the messages that are coming in. This one comes from Sam in Lancashire. Hiya, Phil. Sorry, you're not Petrie. Well, you're not wrong. I'm not Petrie. You're right. But you're not doing too bad, lol. Thank you. I appreciate that. I have zero confidence in Starmer, Sam goes on to say. In fact, I've had zero confidence in any party anymore. Sam, thank you very much indeed. And that kind of echoes what I was saying. Not the fact that I'm not Petrie, but echoes what I was saying about the fact that I don't even think this is a matter of party politics. I think this is political elite in this country. The fact that so many individuals in the House of Commons just don't realise that we can see right through them. That's what I think. This one here comes from Catherine. She says, hey Dave, you can call me Phil if you'd rather. Love your work. My thoughts on Starmer is I think he believes life and the parliamentary chamber are all legal cases. He is delusional and a disgrace. He's disrespecting the country, its people and Parliament, and he has to go. Catherine, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 if you want to have your say either on telephone or indeed if you want to send us a WhatsApp. If you want to text, it's 8787222, even 87222. Start your message with the word talk. And of course, you can also message us through Twitter at talkTV if you so wish. Coming up in just a moment's time, we are going to be looking at two horrific examples of yet more racist behaviour towards the Jewish community. I'll be discussing that with Jonathan Sartadotti, who of course is a broadcaster and a journalist who has looked very much into these types of stories. He's coming up next, along with more of your thoughts as well. All that and so much more. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good evening to you. It's Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken with you until 1 a.m. tomorrow morning here on Talk. It's an absolute pleasure to have your company. I do hope you will continue to stay with us. Keep those messages coming in on 0344 499 1000. You can talk about any of the discussions that we are having this evening. You're most welcome to do so. But my question to you is, how much trust do you have in Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister? That's what I would like to know. 0344 499 1000. Zarina says, Phil, I agree with you. Politicians arrogantly believe we are stupid. Why else do they make promises out of power and then drop them as soon as they enter office? It's a very good question, one of which I wish to have the answers to. But hey, I dare say as the rest of the show unfolds, we will potentially get more of your opinions. Do keep them coming in. Detectives have questioned two teenagers arrested following a targeted arson attack on a synagogue in northwest London. And the Met Police say that the 17 and 19-year-olds are part of a wider pattern of thugs for hire. Now, allegedly, they are recruited by Iranian proxies to carry out a string of firebombings against Jewish sites for, get this, quick cash. It comes as the chief rabbi, Sir Ephraim Mervis, warns that a sustained campaign of violence and intimidation is gathering momentum across the capital. Now, this comes on the same day that a London Underground driver has been suspended after a video emerged of him telling a protester that Jewish passengers are not safe when he is behind the wheel. The Bakerloo Line driver was filmed at a demonstration warning the Jewish community to stay well clear of his trains, sparking an immediate investigation by TfL. The incident has intensified concerns over a rising tide of anti-Semitism in the capital. Let's unpick these somewhat disconcerting occurrences with broadcaster and journalist Jonathan Sutter-Doty, who joins me now. Jonathan, a very good evening to you, although it doesn't feel like a very good evening. Yet two more examples today of why I almost understand why people believe Jewish people are not safe in this country at the moment.
Well, I suppose to some extent that's exactly a fair evaluation, that Jewish people are less safe than they have been in Great Britain at the moment. And these are two cases, as you say, but there's a lot worse out there as well. I mean, there was another arson attack on the synagogue before that. There was also in the news recently the crazed guy who tried to climb into the Israeli embassy. Back into the news because there was footage from his court case that came out, even though the incident was last year. We saw recently the two organisers of those marches that took place in London so frequently over the last 2.5 years from the Palestine Solidarity Campaign found guilty in court. And the thing that they were
but Jonathan, they're not hate marches. Don't forget that. We were told that very clearly. People going on those marches because they genuinely cared about the people of Gaza. Yeah,
well,
right.
That's right. But those two men, as I understood it, were found guilty of breaching the conditions that the police had put on that march. And those conditions were specifically designed to prevent that march going past a synagogue or near a synagogue in the area on a Saturday morning when people were there worshipping. Now, I know people who've actually been in synagogues where these marches have been going past, elderly people who felt very afraid to try and get home from the synagogues on a Saturday morning. But of course, that's what they were found to have ignored that specific request, which was there to protect Jews who are at synagogue praying. So I think all of these things mount up to absolutely make a climate of fear, but justifiable fear among many Jewish people. Let's not forget that it was only around 6 months ago that 2 people died in synagogue in Manchester because a terrorist called Jihad decided to storm that synagogue, and then there was also a shooting from the police, and 2 people died in that incident, again, because they're Jewish. There was a man who was kidnapped and held hostage in Wales. We understand from the court case which found his kidnappers guilty because he was Jewish. There are all of these things happening to Jewish people, and these arson attacks are just the latest. I think we heard Kemi Badenoch saying that if it were black churches being attacked with such frequency within London, within the UK, she expected there'd be a much bigger upheaval. People will be much more incensed, but because it's synagogues, there seems to be much less of a reaction to it.
Well,
I think
so
that this is something that people are noticing.
You're quite right, but I tell you what I think it is more than anything. There are two factors at play here. Number one is that I believe that society is under this stupid delusion, and I do understand where this has come from, because this is kind of what's been fed into us. This is the narrative that has been rammed down our throats for years, is that it is impossible to be racist towards someone who is white. Now, although you and I know that the Jewish community is actually quite diverse, and you don't have to be white to be Jewish, to coin a phrase, the truth is that most people believe Jewish people are, by and large, white, and therefore how can you possibly be racist against white people? Furthermore, the fact that we actually have a separate word, which, by the way, originated from racists themselves who were trying to highlight the difference, if you like, between Jews. The fact that we call racism towards Jewish people anti-Semitism drives me insane. It's not anti-Semitism, it's racism. And as soon as we get our heads around that, maybe people will start realising the severity.
So, look, I see your point, and I often use the word Jew hatred or anti-Jewish violence or whatever you might like. But I think at the end of the day, people who sit behind those sorts of claims that this can't be racism because many of the victims are white, or you can't be racist against a white person, or any of these things. I mean, firstly, those things are obviously just debunked. You can be racist against people who are white. You know, it is completely possible for that to be the case. But regardless of what we call it, obviously attacking synagogues with firebombs, let's not call it racism if people have a problem with that, but it's definitely not a good thing for the people who go to synagogues, and those people are called Jews. So whether you want to acknowledge that Judaism is both a religion and an ethnicity, Jews are an ethnic group under UK law, as I understand it, as much as it is a religion. And Jews have been attacked for their ethnic background or identity in the past, not least during the Nazi Holocaust, when Jews were specifically targeted because of their ethnic Judaism, regardless of their religious observance, or even regardless of whether they were religiously defined as Jews, because Judaism as a religion is traditionally passed down the matrilineal line, but the Nazis were perfectly happy to target Jews for ethnic Jewish origin, i.e. from their father's side. So, you know, there's lots of arguments to be had there. I think ultimately, when people are hiding behind those sorts of things, it really reveals that they're not bothered, perhaps, about Jews being attacked or Jews being singled out or Jews being targeted. And that in itself shows that there is a problem in their mind and their behaviour with Jewish people.
So I do also have to say, Jonathan, that I know this is not a very popular view, but I'm going to say it how I see it, because, to be honest, I usually do. And I think that the Jewish community is not blameless in these attacks either. And the reason why I say that is because I personally, and I am Jewish before anyone starts having a go at me for this, is I don't believe that we as a community react strongly enough when we experience this level of hatred and these kind of attacks. Could you just imagine if it was any other minority in this country? There would understandably be outrage if there were deliberate targets set out just because someone happened to be Muslim, just because someone happened to be Hindu, just because someone happened to be black, Sikh, whatever it is. You could just imagine now that there would not be the same level of tolerance. And if I have to hear our political elite come out with one more stupid statement saying something along the lines, we utterly abhor these kind of attacks, this has no place in our society, shut up, do something about it. Prove to us, as Jews, that you mean that. Because I'm telling you for nothing, that is not what the police and others demonstrate. When you see these kind of hate marches that go on weekend after weekend in the streets of our capital city, and I don't know about you, Jonathan, but every single time I get on the train, I see one more of those blooming boycott Israel stickers with the so-called Palestinian flag behind it. They are all over the place as a subtle reminder, haha, we're out to taunt you. We don't like you, Jews. We're going to keep prodding you. Be outraged. I genuinely don't understand why Jews do not get more outraged at the way we are treated in this country. It's disgusting.
Sure. Well, look, I would never want to say that it's something that Jewish people invite or are part.
No, don't invite, but we don't react enough to.
Yeah. So I personally do believe that we should all react more strongly against it. Not just Jewish people, but actually all Britons should react very strongly against this kind of racism, against these kinds of attacks, against basically endangering people for who they are. And I'll say this as well, actually, because the BBC put out this documentary tonight about anti-Semitism, and it was quite pathetic. I mean,
that'll be interesting to watch, not?
Right. Well, the thing is, it was typical kind of panorama style, this very earnest, slow talking. It was as if it was for people, I don't know, it was just sort of school-age people who'd never heard of a Jew or something along those lines. So I do take my, well, I don't take my hat off, literally, but I thank them for making an effort, I suppose. But ultimately, what they skirted around, and what a lot of this discussion skirts around very often, is that they talked about Israel in this way that made it seem like, well, Jewish people mustn't be blamed for terrible old Israel. And I think that distinction is also something which has invited and caused and been a sort of exaggerator of anti-Semitism, because actually the BBC line on Israel, which has become very much a kind of mainstream line for those who don't know a lot about Israel and the Middle East, is one of the main causes of anti-Semitism. And what I mean by that is that a warped and inverted reading of what's happening in Israel and what Israel is doing in fighting these wars against genocidal jihadist groups that have tried to literally erase and wipe out the country, and that on October the 7th, most recently, did have some success in invading the country and killing, raping, kidnapping. I think that by inverting that and allowing broadcasters or news outlets like the BBC to invert that, and by accepting that, oh, well, you can criticize Israel for its horrible terribleness, but you should leave Jews alone in this country. This distinction itself is quite problematic, because actually one of the root causes of the hatred against Jewish people, rightly or wrongly, in this country is an absolute misunderstanding and inversion of what's going on in Israel. Just to set the record straight on that one, Israel is engaged in war. War is horrible, but it's doing so because of an attempt to eradicate it, because of a multi-decade attempt to eradicate it. Exactly.
On 7 fronts. And this is what annoys me, is the way that people just either talk about Iran or they just talk about Gaza. No, they never talk about the fact that it's absolutely from all sides. It's Hezbollah in the north. It is the Iranians as well. No, I'm not going to say the Iranians. I'll correct that slightly, and I will say the Iranian regime, the Ayatollah and their cronies, because I actually believe the true people of Iran, what I might describe as the Persian people, absolutely do not want to be at war with Israel. In fact, if anything, Persians are actually on the side of Israel, which you believe, ironically. But, you know, all of these different fronts that they're being attacked from, you've got the individuals who are in what people in the West call the West Bank, but in that part of the world is known as Judea and Samaria. You know, they also are constantly trying to terrorize and attack people. Now, fair enough, West Bank might be disputed territory, but I'm afraid it really doesn't give people carte blanche to start trying to destroy other civilians' lives, because to tell you the truth, I think that on either side is totally unacceptable. How are we ever going to have peace unless people actually want it?
Sure, and I think that the misunderstanding, deliberate or otherwise, over Israel in parts of the West, for example, a lot of people here in the UK, is one where they assume that a high death toll, say, in the war in Gaza is a result of deliberate and targeted efforts on the part of Israel to slaughter or kill children or innocents or civilians, which of course is genuinely not the truth. The truth is that there may be a high number of casualties, and there's a lot of dispute over the ratios of civilians to combatants and those sorts of things in the war. But ultimately, it's because Israel is fighting in Gaza and elsewhere an enemy that deliberately takes joy in hiding itself behind its own civilians because they care so little for those lives. And they know that if Israel does end up with this collateral damage, for want of a better phrase, it will be condemned by many around the world for having had the temerity to try to fight back against an aggressor which literally invaded the country and did unthinkable, unspeakable things to its people. And the difference being that when the Palestinians did invade on October the 7th, as with many other of their terrorist attacks over the decades previous to that, they specifically targeted innocents, specifically targeted children or women or families, and not only targeted them for death and kidnap or rape, but did so in some really horrific and brutal ways, killing children in front of their parents or parents in front of their children, people at home in their beds, people having breakfast at their breakfast tables. These are the things
torturing
that they
them
did
as well
deliberately.
before killing them as well.
Absolutely.
So literally just rounding them up and pretending they're going to destroy them and then eventually doing it. Absolutely. These people are revolting.
Filming it, broadcasting it. So the difference between the two is one that I think people ought to remember. And for the Palestinian movement, for the Palestinian so-called liberation movement to pin itself to resistance against Israel and to that sort of activity is genuinely to side with an aggressor that has deliberately targeted innocent people constantly for brutal and painful death and other such treatment in Israel because they're Jewish. It's in the Hamas charter that Hamas is an organization with genocidal intent towards Jews and Jewish Israel, and to try to turn that around.
If the people want to bat the word genocide around, apply it at least to the right side, not to Israel. Do you know, Jonathan, unfortunately time is against us, so I do have to let you go, but the last thing I would say to all of this is the most curious question to ask anyone who seems to side with so-called Palestinians and certainly with the Iranian regime is I always say to them, what would you want your government to do? If you had a situation where in this country we were being attacked on a daily basis with rockets being chucked at us in a desperate attempt to destroy as many innocent civilian lives as possible, what would you want the government of this country to do? And funnily enough, I think you'll find most of them will say exactly what Israel is doing now. But when it's Israel doing it, they think it's wrong. Jonathan Satadotti, thank you so much for everything you do on this subject. I know that it is very, very important argument that we have to go up against on a daily basis, and I really appreciate what you do, as I'm sure many other people in the community do as well. So journalist and broadcaster Jonathan Satadotti there, offering his review on this yet more anti-Semitic, no, let's call it what it is, racist behaviour. 0344 499 1000, get in touch, have your say on any of the subjects we're talking about. We will try and take your calls right after this. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. It's Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken with you until 1 o'clock tomorrow morning here on the home of common sense. Let's have a look at some of your messages that have come in now. This one from Ian. I've asked you, by the way, how much trust do you have in Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer? And Ian says, I can't believe our Prime Minister just spent 3 days with his best mate, Macron, and did not cure the migrant boat problem. Really, Ian? You can't believe that? I kind of can. Not in the least bit surprised. And what else have we got here? Let's see. We've got a message here that's come in from... oh, yes, this was from Caroline, who was highlighting this advert. I did see this, actually, Caroline. I'm not going to show it on screen for no other reason than I think it is deeply offensive and also quite distressing for some people probably as well. But it is an advert, in inverted commas, that has apparently allegedly appeared on a train that depicted a hangman. So you know the game Hangman that you play as a child where you draw one line of the gallows and sort of a ring of the head and so on and so forth, as you sort of got a letter wrong as you're playing a guessing game. Anyway, it's a depiction of a hangman with, you can see the word Israel filled out on it. And it says, it gives you a clue as to some nonsense about which country is carrying out genocide and brings back the death penalty to la la la. Anyway, so I did see that. It is abhorrent, but I have to make it very clear that this is obviously not an official advert on the London Underground, and I'm perfectly sure that in the absence from anyone from TfL that they would strongly deny that this is in any way legitimate. And Caroline also goes and says, so glad you call it racism, as it would not be tolerated for any other ethnicity. And I'm afraid I have to agree with that. I really struggle to get my head around why we don't call anti-Semitic behaviour for what it is. It is racism towards Jewish people. 0344 499 1000. Do join in the conversation, just like Cindy in Michigan has done. A very good afternoon, I suppose, to you, Cindy. How are you?
Oh, good, Phil. You know what? You are such a brilliant presenter and speaker. You're incredible.
You're very kind, but I don't think for a second that's what you... Thank you, Cindy. It's a great pleasure to speak with you, but I strongly suspect that's not what moved you to call, however flattered I am. But I remember, my head has to fit out of the door after this, so I absolutely can't possibly sit here and listen to you shower me with praise, which is very nice of you, I'm quite sure. However, please do tell us what has moved you to call this evening. I know that obviously you're over there in Michigan, and actually
yes.
I know that obviously you don't necessarily have much of a say in what happens in British politics, but I know that you certainly observe it and you follow it quite closely. What kind of impression do we think that Starmer's got over there in the US of A?
Well, first of all, I deeply care, and this is why I watch Talk almost exclusively. And I want to say about Starmer, right now, we as in the United States, we don't have very good thoughts about him. He's right now trying to think of every distraction to make the British people look over there, look over here. It's this person's fault. No, it's this, and a bunch of word salad to confuse you. But I know you all are much smarter than, well,
this is the problem. This is what I said earlier, Cindy, when I was speaking to Joanna Bell, that I can't believe the way that our political class, and I really do believe this is across parties, I don't think this is exclusive to Labour by any stretch of the imagination, how our political class in this country seem to think the British public are that stupid. Now, don't get me wrong, I appreciate there are some pretty dumb people over here, but that's not exclusive. But the political class, they just think we're idiots, clearly, because what other possible explanation is there?
Oh, deeply. The political class, they treat you like you're just totally, completely stupid without a brain cell. But you know what? For thinking that, they're actually the stupid ones, aren't they?
Well, I mean, look, they do stupid things. I will say this. I don't believe any politician is stupid, and I'll tell you why I think that is because you can't be stupid to get to that position. But you can certainly do stupid things, and I think it's born out of, not you, one can do stupid things, and I think it is born out of this idea that basically that age-old belief that power just goes straight to your head. If you are elevated to a different class in society, then why wouldn't you think to yourself, I can do whatever I want? I'm obviously the brilliant one because I've got into Parliament. They haven't.
You know what? That's right. That's true. Yeah, because they have a big head and they're thinking they're above maybe people.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only thing that is, well, it's kind of the only thing that makes sense to me, is because I can't understand why, to tell you the truth, that they would even think of behaving in any other way. Cindy, I'm really sorry to cut you off. There's only for time reasons, but I'm really glad you called me. 0344 499 1000. Thank you so much indeed. I do hope we'll speak again. I'm here until Wednesday evening as well, covering for Petrie, so it'd be great to speak to you again. Right, coming up after the top of the hour, we are going to look at Tuesday's front pages. Now, I'm going to be in the company of Elliot Heilpern. You're not going to have heard of Elliot before because he's a new voice to talk, and we're very excited. He's an economic and political commentator, and he joins me live in the studios as we take a look. I wonder what will be on the front pages. Shall we have a guess? One way or another, the conversation continues. Your thoughts and your messages will continue to be read out. Get in touch. 0344 499 1000. Stick with me. It's Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken here on the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and a very good evening to you. This is The Late Show here on Talk, and in particular the pay-per-view hour is what you are experiencing at the moment. It is Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken with you until, well, the top of the hour at the very least, depending on what time of day you're listening, I guess, really. But one way or another, it's an absolute pleasure to have your company. And the idea of this is to have a look at what's going on in the front pages. And every time on this marvellous show, Petrie is always joined in the studio by a tip-top voice full of opinion and something to help you sink your teeth into the stories that we have to digest. And I've made it absolutely no exception to that rule this evening, because I'm delighted to welcome Elliot Heilpern, who is an economic and political commentator. Now, if you think to yourself, I don't recognise Elliot's name, well, I can tell you why that is because Elliot's a brand new voice here to talk, and we're absolutely thrilled to welcome him to The Late Show. Elliot, a very good, good evening, good morning. I think it depends when you're listening to this show.
Well,
how are you?
Thank you. Yeah, very, very good to be here, and thank you for asking me.
No worries at all. Right, now, just before we go through Tuesday's front pages, one thing that I absolutely want to do is get your thoughts on the story du jour, let's be honest, because I don't really think many people are going to be talking about much else other than the state that our esteemed Prime Minister finds himself in. And I've been asking others how much trust they have in the Prime Minister. Now, I don't know how much trust I had with him in the first place, to be honest, but since he has come to power, he has absolutely proven to me that whatever trust I would have had has as good as evaporated. How do you feel?
I have to tell you, I have absolutely no trust in him at all, and 99.9% of the people I speak to, in whatever background, whatever profession, don't either. I have to tell you, Phil, as Prime Minister, that is a tremendously powerful job. It has great responsibility, and with great responsibility has great accountability. And I'm afraid accountability and being responsible for your actions is something that this particular awful individual doesn't do. I mean,
it's amazing how he doesn't seem to remember the privilege that comes with it. And I'm not talking about sort of when people rather crassly refer to certain members of society being privileged and reminding us that just because we might come from a certain denomination that we're more privileged than others. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that automatically, because of being the Prime Minister of this great nation, he's supposed to be in a position of reverence. We're supposed to look at our leader almost, if you like, with hope and with aspiration to think that maybe they might make this country even better. But for some strange reason, it appears as though successive prime ministers, and certainly the current one, seem to be doing just the opposite.
Yeah, well, if you look at him, I don't know how many U-turns we've had. So if you just take that alone...
17, I think was the last count. 16, 17, something like that.
So if you just take that alone, leaving the current awful situation, you know, if you have a policy, you stick to it. If you're going to change it, change it. But 14 times, 17 times, how can you have any trust in an individual? More importantly, when they come out with a new piece of legislation or some new policy, how can you trust them? How can you believe in them? And here's the thing I want to stress. The most important thing for a government, Phil, and for a leader is to provide integrity. And by integrity, I don't mean that he has to have respect. Of course he has to have respect, but by integrity means that the population, the people of this once great country, have faith and belief and trust in the individual. That's the integrity. And I'm afraid, as far as this individual is concerned, don't have it. I mean, just one example. There's many examples. Whether you agree with the Iran war, you don't agree with the Iran war. Whether you agree with Trump or you don't agree with Trump, the fact is that the US is our greatest ally. And if you look at the billions they put into Europe, into NATO, and a Marshall Plan, which people have forgotten about, $170 billion that's incredible. Then the fact is, for Starmer to say, no, you can't use our landing strips, I mean, just that alone, I think, is truly appalling. What impression does that give? And if you look at this whole business of supporting, we are doing this and we are doing that, and he went to Qatar, I think, and Bahrain recently and talked about, you know, we are opening the Straits of Hormuz. We are doing nothing.
Correct. I was going to say, but this is it. And actually, Bob in Nottingham has texted, and I think he hits the nail on the head where he says, we have a PM with a narcissistic spectrum disorder. It's all about himself, but never his fault. No. And that's exactly it. So when you say about we are opening the Strait of Hormuz, you're right, but he's not doing anything about it.
We're not doing anything. And here's the thing, to show how embarrassed I personally feel. Apparently that boat, that warship, whatever you want to call it, Dragon, do you know it hasn't reached Cyprus? Do you know it's stuck somewhere? I don't know where. I've tried to find out. It's stuck. Do you know why it's stuck? This is going to make your viewers and your audience laugh. The latrines have got broken. Well, do you know what? They went to the moon and back when the latrines weren't right. I mean, give me a break. This is the man running the country. So how can you trust and have respect for him? I think, Phil, I've seen some pretty awful prime ministers in my 71 years, but I can tell you this man is absolutely awful, and it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace to this nation, and I'll tell you what it's a real disgrace to, Phil. It's a disgrace to those people, if we're talking about defence and defence alone, but the whole environment. It's a disgrace to those people who have fought and died for this country. It is a disgrace for those people who've contributed to this country, and it's a disgrace to our heritage, to our values, and to our whole demeanour. The whole fabric of our nation has been completely pulled down. The previous mob were awful, but I can honestly say that this particular mob, and they are a mob, have no idea. No, I have no trust in him or any of his front bench.
Well, I mean, I have to say that it really, if ever there was a case of better the devil you know, I can't think of a stronger example. You know, everyone quite rightly was lambasting the Tories when they were in power for the last 14 or so years with how awful, let's be honest, so many of their ridiculous policies were. I mean, the Boris wave, jeepers creepers. I mean, we'll be paying for that for decades in so many different ways, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the costs to taxpayers, every single which way you look at it. I mean, there is no denying that Boris Johnson betrayed this country so unbelievably badly. It was unbearable. And then to frankly sort of turn their back on Liz Truss, who seemed to have the right ideas, maybe didn't implement them in the best possible way, in fact some might argue in the most terrible way, but at the same time she certainly seemed to try and bring conservative values that most people remember to mean conservative values back to the front. Nope, they binned her off because they didn't like that. And then we've got Rishi Sunak, who clearly the Tory stronghold, the Tory voters, they wanted him as the Prime Minister in the first place, which is probably why they turned their back on Liz Truss. You know, he just came across as weak. Sorry, nice enough chap, but weak. And now Starmer, good grief. I mean, I don't know what this country has done so wrong to deserve such shoddy leadership for decades now, literally decades.
Well, you make a very good point. It's interesting, isn't it? In every single government that we have had since the war, and probably prior to the war, but let's just go back to those awful Blair days where I think all this really started. The fact is, we have people, Chancellor of the Exchequer, this particular woman, Rachel from Accounts, as she's called, she's never run a business in her life, as far as I understand it, allegedly. She's never run a P&L, a profit and loss account. She's never run any profit-producing entity. So how can she, or any of these people who have never been in the commercial world, Phil, how can they tell us how to run the country if they've never had experience of running their own business? I'll give you an example. You go to the dentist. Would you go to a dentist? You had to have something done with your tooth or something. But, well, what's his experience? Well, I don't know. He's just qualified. Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm a bit concerned. You move house. You get a valuation on your house. Well, he's a surveyor. Well, he hasn't. He is, but he hasn't actually. He's just qualified, but he has no experience. I mean, why would you let people run a country of 65 million individuals whom don't have any experience of day-to-day commercial activity, day-to-day working capital management, day-to-day affairs? This is the problem. Most of them, particularly in the Labour Party, they leave university, they join a union, they get paid by the levy, so they're not producing anything. They then end up in probably a local council. They then eventually get elected to some constituency. In other words, it's all through the taxpayers' money that they earn their living, but they don't produce. They never have produced, yet they're in power telling us how to produce and what we should do. To me, that is absolutely madness on steroids. And here's the situation that we have with every government. The last government were truly appalling, just the same. And it's a terrible thing. This is a problem we have with this country, the way things are run. And because we've run it like this for 50, 100 years, I don't know how long, oh, that's okay, Elliot, we'll keep it that way. We've always done it that way. No, that's not. Because we've always done it that way, that doesn't mean to say it can't change. Where's the innovation? Where are the young people? Where are the new ideas? They're not there, are they? The same faces who have never produced anything positive, yet they are in charge. All wrong, Phil.
Let's have a look at some of the front pages for Tuesday, shall we? And the Times is the first paper, leading, of course, with the same story. PM forced Foreign Office to approve Mandelson job. Sacked civil servant to accuse Starmer of pushing through appointment despite vetting concerns. So Sir Keir Starmer will be accused today, that's Tuesday, of pressuring the Foreign Office into approving the appointment of Lord Mandelson despite being aware, remember this, despite being aware, he says he wasn't, but despite being aware of his friendship with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein and his business links to Russia and China. It is... I just cannot get my head around this. I've said it before, I'll say it again. The British people deserve so much better. Forget Labour, Conservative, Liberal, Reform, Green, whoever. I don't care. The political party, we as a nation, we spend and pay, most of us, a fortune to exist here. And we deserve the absolute finest in political class. And instead of that, I feel as though not only do we have the bottom, what's beneath the bottom of the barrel, the bacteria beneath the bottom of the barrel is how I feel we have when it comes to the political class of this country. It is so unbelievable that our once great nation, that genuinely I think used to be the envy of the world, is now looking at us with pity and laughing at us and rightly mocking us because they think the British are so stupid to be able to vote in individuals like this. The Prime Minister of the country, the Prime Minister of this once great country, is being accused of forcing through the appointment of an individual who was so unbelievably murky. In my humble opinion, Mandelson has got the ability to make some of the most notorious and infamous criminals. Now, I know that Mandelson is not convicted per se, but you need to understand my despise for his behaviour. He makes some of those individuals look almost like civilised individuals. It's just completely unbearable. These are people who are in charge of our country. It makes me angry and it makes me genuinely physically sick.
Well, I agree with you, but I think there's something deeper. They are in charge of our country. Are they? Do you know what for me has come out of this? It's complete confusion of who said what and who did what. You make a very good point. I'm looking at it here that Starmer supposedly pushed it through. He knew, I read in the paper, he knew about the hindrances, if I could put it that way, of appointing Mandelson. And don't forget, Mandelson had form, which we all knew about. I've just made a note here, £370,000. Do you remember that? From Geoffrey Robinson when he was in the Labour Party, forcing the passports through for the Hindura brothers, the whole Epstein affair. And Epstein, supposedly, they reckon, was very close to Russia. You have Mandelson's company, I think it's called Global Council, very close with China. You know, it's, in my view, and again, people I've spoken to, it's almost as if these individuals are verging on treason. What's being said? What is?
I don't think it's verging on treason. I really don't.
Well, in the old days, you know, I mean, I call it betrayal. In the old days, not that I'm for it, you'd be strung up. These people, I think, are responsible for a lot of things that are still being covered up. And just on your other point about Starmer, I mean, who is actually running the country? Is it the civil service or is it the elected government? It's this point that I picked up. This Sir Ollie Robbins, is it?
Yeah, Sir Ollie Robbins, yeah.
He said, the rule is, the unwritten rule is, and this is terribly important, the unwritten rule is in the civil service that under this development vetting, which I don't really understand what the difference is between that and security vetting, but nevertheless, under that, if there are issues with the nominated potential candidate, you have to make them clear, and if you don't like it, they don't get elected. But the leader of the country can be told we're not having this man or woman, but he or she cannot be told why. This is ridiculous. This is madness. Why the leader of the country, who is an elected individual, a prime minister, who he himself has admitted he wanted this Mandelson chap to be the ambassador, why shouldn't we all know? Why doesn't the government running the day know why the most important diplomatic post, the individual concerned, cannot be chosen because he's done X, Y and Z, but they can't disclose X, Y and Z. So who's running this country? Is it the civil service or is it the elected government? And that comes back to the point that I would also like to say, that the country itself, from a systemic perspective of government, the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, the inter pares between all three elements of our constitution desperately need fixing. And if Walter Badgeau was around, I remember him from my economics and politics days at business school, he wrote the English Constitution. We have an unwritten constitution. I think, as far as I'm concerned, and people I've spoken to, I think maybe we should have a written constitution, and there should be clear guidelines as to who does what and when and how, and it should be made transparent. I have never heard of the leader of a country nominating an individual and being told, we can't have him. Well, why can't we have him? I can't tell you.
I told you you'd love what he'd say. Elliot Halpern, who is an economic and political commentator, joins me, Phil Dave, to review Tuesday's front pages. We will continue to do so right after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. It's the paper review hour here on Talk. It's Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken, and I'm joined in the marvellous company of Elliot Halpern, who is an economic and political commentator. He joins me in the studio, and we are collectively going through Tuesday's front pages. Now, we started going through the papers. We started with the Times, but I also want to talk about one of the other stories on the front page of the Times for Tuesday, and that is that all schools to be told they must ban smartphones. Schools will be forced to ban smartphones after a surprise government policy change. Sir Keir Starmer has resisted calls from the opposition and campaigners to introduce a statutory ban, insisting that most schools already had restrictions. However, after mounting pressure, the government has committed itself to making the rules mandatory. Amen to that, because as far as I'm concerned, smartphones are, however brilliant they are, and make no mistake, I, like so many, would be lost without mine, agree they are an essential part of everyday life and we all use them. I get that. But there is no need whatsoever for children of school age to have smartphones. Fair enough, if they have to have a phone in order to call home once in a while if they get in trouble, totally understand that. Smartphones, no. Think of what you and I have access to on a smartphone. Children have access to the same unless parents are more technically capable than their children. And in most cases, they're not. Elliot, what do you make of this?
No, I think you're right. I think it's a difficult one, and I'm betwixt and between. You're totally right. As far as education is concerned, and I'm afraid that has clearly deteriorated in this country since my day, but the fact is, I don't think smartphones per se are needed as part of the day-to-day lessons. However, you make a good point. Something could happen. The boy, the girl, whoever needs to ring his mother or his dad or whatever, understand that. And what I don't like about it is that it's just another example of a government interfering and sticking its nose into our day-to-day affairs. What I would prefer is one of two things: that the parents take responsibility. If they want to give their children an iPhone or a smartphone, fine. You don't bring it to school. So one, the parents have to take much more responsibility, and I think parent responsibility in our day-to-day social environment has, I'm afraid, been lost.
Totally, but I tell you where I think that's come from.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and the other thing was, the other option is, if the child or the student or the young kid wants to bring the phone to school, okay, but they should be handed in, so to speak, with the head teacher or whatever, and then they do their lessons, and at the end of the day, they can pick them up and phone mum, dad to be collected or whatever. Of course, as usual, if I may just say very quickly, there's no sense of balance. It's all or nothing. It's banned and that's it. No, for goodness sake, parents need to come in and have some responsibility. My goodness, when I grew up, my parents were certainly telling me what I can and couldn't do, and I discussed it with them and we came to a compromise.
No, but I understand completely.
But the school should also take a
stance. I get it, Elliot, I get it completely. But I tell you where this has come from, I believe, is that for so many years now, parents have been told, and actually all adults have been told, you must not discipline children, you must not pick on children, you must not say anything to children that could be upsetting to them, could offend them. Discipline, when I was at school, was only just still the idea of you could be dragged across a classroom and sort of put against a wall, or, you know, sort of to some degree maybe your parents would give you a clip round the ear or something like that. Now, I have to say my parents did not do that. They didn't believe in it, but it was still a thing when I was a child. And now parents and adults are so terrified if they so much as even brush past a student by mistake that they will be thrown in prison for being some sort of pervert towards that child. I am not in the least bit surprised that children are running as feral as they are, because they have access to smartphones, which they have access to all the things that we as adults have as well on their smartphones. But not only that, they have got no consequences because the parents and others are afraid to discipline them. It is absolutely shocking. We must move on, otherwise we're not going to get on to it. It's on the front page of the Times. Let's have a look at what else we've got. Front page of the Daily Mirror for Tuesday. A Mandelson vetting crisis. They chose not to tell me. So Keir Starmer yesterday blasted civil servants for not telling him Peter Mandelson had failed security vetting. I think we've covered that. We'll continue to cover that a little later on. But let's look also on the front page of the Daily Mirror. King on Queen's 100th birthday. These times would have troubled her, but she believed in a brighter dawn. That is, of course, His Majesty the King, referring to his late mother, the late great Queen Elizabeth II.
Well, Phil, how long have we got? I'm afraid to tell you, I'm very, very disappointed in the royal family, and I'm desperately disappointed in King Charles. And I'm telling you the absolute truth here, and I mean this sincerely. I'm a great supporter, as my family was, of the royal family and the late Queen. But I'm sorry to say that this latest business with his brother and with his son, I know that King Charles has got issues. He's got cancer. I believe his daughter-in-law's had cancer, so on and so forth. But, you know, if, as Andrew Lowney says in his book, that the Queen didn't know about Andrew. The Queen 20 years ago was well. Okay, she wasn't very well recently, but and she died, unfortunately, but she knew, they knew, according to Andrew Lowney, what Andrew was doing. And the point I want to say, whether they knew about his sexual exploits, so to speak, or his business dealings, I don't know. But something was going on that they knew. And if the Queen and the royal family, including Charles, if it is proved that there was some form of cover-up, I'm sorry, the whole aspirations, the reverence, Phil, that I and many others felt for Queen Elizabeth, I'm afraid it's just going. And it's not enough for Charles now to say, let the law do its course. People don't agree with me, and they say he can't do more. He can. He can tell his brother, if he's so innocent, which he says he is, Andrew, jolly well get on the plane and get in front of the court in America, if that's where it's going to be, and sort it out. I mean,
I understand that, but let's be honest, this would be the worst example of kangaroo court there's ever been.
Well, maybe, but let me ask you this. What was the $12 million for? That's 10 million sterling. And I mean, did that come out of public funds? Nobody knows.
Are you talking about the alleged payoff? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. This was hush money. So I think in order to really get this right, and this 100th birthday and the future of the monarchy, I'm very sorry to say, I think Charles will, if it is proved that he was involved, and I have to say, I only have evidence from Andrew Lowney's book, as we all do, and he's speaking about it everywhere. I think, unfortunately, and I say again, I'm a great supporter of Charles, he will have to fall on his sword, and he'll have to make a clean break, and he will have to hand over to William and Kate, and they will have to modernise the monarchy, they'll have to slim it down, and there'll have to be true transparency. And in the meantime, that awful son in America with that awful rotten actress, I couldn't bear her in Suits, and that awful brother, they need to just be completely eviscerated, and the whole monarchy needs to come right up with fresh faces and a new approach, and appreciate we support them. And I'm sorry for Charles, I really am. He's waited 70 odd years and this is what he's got.
Tough situation.
Is very cruel.
It is indeed. That's, I think, something we can all agree on. But there's also some positives as well. Just not so much in the front pages, I'm afraid, for Tuesday. But one way or another, we'll continue to look at what is on those front pages in just a moment. It's Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken. It's me, it's Elliot Halpern, and it's you. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. Got a message here that's come through on 0344 499 1000 from Joanna from Salisbury, who says, "Hi Phil and Elliot, who is running the country?" Joanna says, "I picked up from this statement's questions that Starmer wouldn't answer if McSweeney passed security vetting. Starmer made it quite clear he wasn't allowed to know why Mandelson failed vetting, then insisting it was because of Epstein. He was told by just about everyone in Parliament today all of the reasons, but Starmer kept coming back to the insistence it was Epstein." Joanna, look, I think that we can all agree that what we witnessed, to those of us who were unfortunate enough to witness the Prime Minister trying to wriggle his way out of this situation in the Commons, that he didn't have all the answers because he knew that some of those answers probably, allegedly, would land us in a bit of trouble. So I think that Tuesday is going to be a very interesting day, one way or the other, because we're obviously going to, I suppose, hear from Sir Ollie Robbins and see what he has to say in all of this debacle. But I don't know whether we'll ever know the truth. That is, I'm afraid, the sad reality, is I don't know if we will. Anyway, Elliot Harpen, economic and political commentator, is joining me in the studio to go through Tuesday's front pages. Let's have a look at the Daily Mail. It's everyone's fault but his. Starmer finally admits he was wrong to appoint Mandelson, but still won't resign. Instead, he blames civil service, accusing officials of deliberate cover-up on vetting. As PM's incredible story is jeered, Kemi skewers him for failing to take responsibility. Bob in Nottingham, by the way, Elliot, has messaged. You might like to hear this. Bob says, I like this guy, Elliot, and you're doing a great job, Phil. Bob, that's terribly kind of you. Thank you very much. Didn't add anything else. That was the only reason Bob decided to text in. He approves of you, so you've won over a fan.
Thank you, Bob, whoever you are.
Let's have a look at the front page of The Guardian, if we must. Gloves at the ready, please. Starmer on collision course with Robbins over Mandelson vetting is their headline. But also on the front page of The Guardian, Vance to lead US envoys if Tehran agrees to talks. JD Vance is expected to fly to Islamabad at the head, or as the head, I should imagine, of the US delegation if Iran agrees to fresh talks. The current ceasefire deadline looms. Now, that's actually reasonably measured for The Guardian. I'm slightly surprised that they don't go more towards the perspective of Iran, which they seem to have found very easy to do since all of the trouble started in the Middle East. But I think that whether or not Tehran agrees to talks or not, to my mind, one way or another, is actually going to show Tehran in a very interesting light, because if they agree to talks, then it is going to demonstrate to the die-hard Ayatollah following that potentially they're going soft, right, if they agree to talk to the West. And if they don't agree to talks, then that could expose them for the vile regime that they are. Not that I think that many media outlets will be brave enough to admit how wrong they've had it in recent years. But it's quite an interesting position that Tehran... And actually this further proves to me that as much as I know that Trump comes across sometimes as a bit of a fool, and I don't agree with everything he says, I actually think that this he's absolutely spot on. He's got Tehran over a barrel, I think.
I think we need to step back here. We need to really just take a breather and look at this regime and the mental approach that they have. Whether Starmer, or whether NATO, whether the West, whether we here agree we are at war, we're not at war. As far as I'm concerned, and again, people I speak to, we've been at war with this regime, Phil, for 47 years.
Totally.
There have
the Persian people.
Yes,
Let's not forget that.
That's right. And we have talks after talks after talks. And the mindset of this particular repugnant regime is very clear. They want a global caliphate, a Shiite global caliphate, not a Sunni global caliphate. And their aim, as they say, destroy Israel, that's number one, the little Satan. America, the great Satan. And when Starmer and NATO, proving so weak, don't come out and say, not our war, no, it's okay.
I have a theory why they do that, is I think that they know the threat that the Iranian regime
I was going to say that...
And they're doing it to say, no, please. It's a bit like sort of, it's the coward's approach in the playground, if you think about it. Now, that's not going to go down very well, but I was that coward in the playground, so I feel like I can say it. But it's the coward's approach in the playground, when you've got an individual who would turn around and say, it wasn't me, please don't attack me. But it feels like that.
No, you're right. What I was going to say was, Israel first, America next, and then Europe. The hatred that they have in their persona, this regime, for Western Judeo-Christian heritage, our values, our tolerance, they loathe us, and we need to wake up to that. There are cells, there are attacks on Jewish synagogues, which we understand have been orchestrated by Iranian representatives from the Revolutionary Guards, and that's the other issue. They are split. There are members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard who simply say, no, the West is evil and we're going to bury them. And there are others that are supposedly a little bit more sanguine. The regime is split, so you're getting different voices. But I'd like to say to Vance...
But it's amazing the media are being selective about which voices you hear.
So, yes, good point. But I would say to Vance, you know what, mate? You can talk as much as you like to these people, but in the end, they have one thing: they will bury you. And it's a terrible thing to say. War is terrible, but at the end of the day, that is what you're dealing with. It's a revolting republic, a terrible regime. Do you know, they do the most terrible things. It was in the news. This actually was in the news. They hung some 18-year-old kid. They don't hang people. They actually pull them up with cranes.
Well, I guess let's not go into graphic detail. I know exactly.
It's a terrible thing.
And it is totally and utterly. And that is the point, is that this regime is absolutely vile. And I think it was the great Golda Meir, who, of course, was the first and only female Prime Minister of Israel, who said you cannot negotiate with people who want to kill you.
Well, I think that's probably right.
Front page, and that, by the way, goes for all of us. Make no mistake. It is not just Israel. It's all of us. Remember that. Front page of the Daily Express. For once, you were actually right, PM. It beggars belief, is their headline. They say Keir Starmer stunned MPs as he agreed that his Mandelson vetting fiasco beggars belief. Well, yeah, I think that we've said all we can say about that. Let's look to the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Front page of the Daily Telegraph. I know many MPs will find these facts to be incredible. Starmer jeered as he admits Mandelson scandal beggars belief and blames Foreign Office for the cover-up. Quite extraordinary, really, isn't it? There are other stories on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. We've already touched upon the fact that the King refers to his mama would be troubled by the world. Elizabeth II would have been deeply troubled by much in the modern world, the King has revealed. And also on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, Labour and Lords row over social media ban. Labour is embroiled in a fresh row with the Lords after Peers put its flagship school bill at risk of collapse. That's the front page of the Daily Telegraph. And you know when a story is serious, because even the Daily Star covers it. And the Daily Star today, a sorry excuse. Dolt is their headlines. Keir, I didn't know I was fibbing. No Prime Minister. Keir Starmer blamed Foreign Office officials for the Peter Mandelson vetting scandal. Isn't he in charge? That is Daily Star's front page. The Eye continues this exact same story because it's all over the front pages. The Eye says, Starmer, I know my story sounds incredible. Prime Minister accuses Foreign Office chief of unforgivable cover-up on Mandelson. He just doesn't want to take responsibility, does he? I tell you what, why not? Let's give ourselves a bit of a breather, shall we, Elliot? Because there's only so many pictures of Sir Keir Starmer one can look at without needing a slight breather. So we're going to do that. We'll continue going through the front pages and possibly delve into some of the stories you might have missed from Monday. All that, so much more still to come. It's Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. It's Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken, and this is the Paper Review Hour. In the studio with me is economic and political commentator Elliot Harpern. And Elliot, I have to tell you, your debut on Talk is going down an absolute storm, because we have a message here from Judy and Paul Richards, who says, very interesting show. Elliot certainly expresses himself well and makes great sense. He should be given the platform to challenge our government. So there you go, Elliot. You could go up against the Prime Minister, according to Judy and Paul Richards.
Well, very nice of you, Judy and Paul. Thank you.
Well, there you go. And also I have to say hello to Alison, who's in County Antrim, and who says that loving the show this evening. It's very kind of you, Alison. And thank you indeed for your kind words. I do appreciate it. It's always nice to know that there's someone out there listening. Let's carry on going through the front pages, shall we? The front page of the Financial Times. They are also leading on the only story in town. Starmer claims officials deliberately kept him in the dark over Mandelson. Sir Keir Starmer has fended off calls for him to quit by claiming he was deliberately kept in the dark over Peter Mandelson's vetting. Also on the front page of the FT, the FTSE bosses get 18% pay bump, but still lag behind US-style moonshot awards. So FTSE 100 companies have boosted chief execs' pays by almost a fifth and reduced the importance they play on environmental, social and governance targets in the past year, amid a global war for talent that has handed US executives outsized salaries. Now look, Elliot, I know that you are quite the businessman and you understand a lot of this malarkey, where maybe I'm going to hold my hands up and say it's not my strong suit. I have read the FT from time to time, but I'm not going to pretend to understand everything they put in it. But then again, I guess it's not aimed at me. I'm more news and politics. So from your perspective, maybe help us understand why it is that we live in a world where things seem to be getting very, very expensive, and yet there are companies, especially in the FTSE 100, where the bigwigs seem to be getting more money, where everyone else seems to feel like they've got less in their pocket. Why is that okay?
Well, I can't tell you why it is, because each company has its own policy, and generally, from my own background in international banking, both in the city and across America and in continental Europe, there are different views on what CEOs and senior people should be paid. The fact is, as far as the large PLCs are concerned, the CEOs do earn a lot of money, but that money has to generally, as far as I understand, in the shareholder meetings I've been involved in, that generally, Phil, has to be voted upon by the shareholders and also stakeholders. So there is a lot of discussion before CEOs get the sort of monies they get. On the other hand, having worked in America, with great respect to my colleagues in the US, I think corporate America, I will get shot for saying this, but I'm going to say it.
Hopefully not.
Is very greedy. And if you look at some...
Well, I think we can all agree with that.
If you look at some of the CEO's salaries in the larger financial institutions, I think it's absurd. Nevertheless, the fact is that has always been the way. That doesn't mean to say it's been right. If I could bring it closer to home on some of the CEOs pay for the utilities, now this is where I really think there is an issue. These are now private concerns, and I'm not going to name them, but there are two in particular which are very well known, and I believe, allegedly, a year or two ago, one of the CEOs of the worst named water utility, I won't say any more than that, got a huge rise. For what? The company itself is in debt, the balance sheet is minus goodness knows what, and they're probably going to have to be renationalised under this Labour socialist nonsense government and have money put in.
Look, so I think that, to be fair, I mean, you're very
strong
kind.
Argument.
You're very kind and very right to say allegedly, but at the same time, I think that the facts do speak for themselves. When you see water bosses, regardless of whether or not it is the Thames Water or whether it's whoever it is, you can say no, but you sort of say that. But to be honest, let's speak openly here, because this is what we do.
I believe it was.
The truth is, when we see our utility bills going sky high, but yet feel like we're not getting the service with burst water pipes all over, and believe me, I know this is not exclusive to Thames, I know there's plenty of other utility companies out there, and I'm perfectly sure Thames, if they were here, would deny any such allegations. But when you have a situation where we, as the utility users, feel that our bills are going sky high,
I would agree.
It feels like there's a gross sense of injustice going on when we're paying more for a really rubbish service that seems to be getting worse across the board. Like I said, this is not about one particular company now. No. Seems to be getting worse across the board, and yet, as long as they've got more money, they're all right, and to heck with the rest of us.
And it's very quickly, another one, very, very quickly, you look at some of the CEOs, they're not private, they're some of the local authorities. Absolutely absurd. So totally. I would agree that there are real issues. I think all I'm saying is, understand, I do agree, it's not good. We have to look at the particular industry, the vertical, and to ensure that there is due diligence and compliance with shareholders and stakeholders, and that isn't always the case, particularly in the public utilities, the now private utilities, so to speak.
That's the front page of the Financial Times for Tuesday, and then finally the front page of the Metro for Tuesday reads, incredible. Yes, Prime Minister Starmer calls civil servants' actions in Mandelson row staggering as opponents demand he resigns. Those are Tuesday's front pages. Now let's take a little moment, Elliot, because I know that you have been having a little rummage through Monday's newspapers to see some of the stories that we might have missed. And let's have a look and see what we've got here. I can see that you have picked out from the Daily... this is from the Daily Telegraph, I see. So let's look at Daily Telegraph. And it says, the headline here, police failing Jews over Iran's thugs for hire. Spoke in the 10 o'clock hour to Jonathan Satadotti about this. And I agree completely that it does feel as though that the police are not taking Jew hatred as seriously as they would take others. What is this? What do you make of it?
Oh, well, I have to tell you, I don't want to labour the point, you've been through it, but the fact is this is a terrible indictment of our society. We've had 2 synagogues firebombed, we've had murders in Manchester, we've had restaurants which are supposedly owned or part owned by Israeli management. I mean, what is happening here? It is truly disgusting. It's a terrible indictment of our society, and the government and the police and the general institutions and authorities are not doing anything. And can I tell you why I think they're not doing anything? This is a terrible thing to say, I'm going to say it. They don't care. It's a terrible thing to say, Elliot. Yes, it is, isn't it? Why don't they care? I'll tell you why. Because there's probably 250 to 300,000 Jewish or members of the Jewish community in this country who have contributed tremendously to this country, and maybe there are a hell of a lot more Muslims. Now, I don't want to get into Jews, Muslims, Israel, the Middle East. The fact is, 5 to 6 million Muslims, which I understand is what we have here, who can vote. Well, that's probably,
but to be fair, they're not voting for the police, to be fair. No. I mean, they vote police commissioner.
No, but I'm talking about the government who, at the end of the day, the government has to do something. And if the government feels that by passively doing something to protect the Jewish community could, dare I say, upset the members of the Muslim community, I mean, let's be honest here. I don't know, 5 million, 6 million Muslims, good. I hope they're very happy. That's about 100 seats in Parliament. And, 250,000 Jewish individuals is probably a constituency the size of Hertsmere or Barnet.
Maybe. I mean, look, I think when we break it down into sort of political landscaping, then the truth is that regardless of whether it's 4 or 5 million Muslims versus 250,000 Jewish people, the truth is that actually in the grand scheme of things, neither community would make that much of a massive dent in the political makeup of the country, primarily because we know that both the Jewish community and the Muslim community tend to stick together. There's often the case where it's birds of a feather, if you like. And so there are pockets of society where it's sort of quite rich in Islamic faith, and then there's one or two areas of London and Manchester that have obviously large Jewish communities. So I think in the grand scheme of things, I think politicians don't realise it probably won't make that much of a massive difference. But what I do believe is that there are fundamentalists, and this is what I really want to make the distinction. I get very twitchy when we have this idea that somehow all Muslims, I'm not saying you're saying this at all, by the way, but I get very twitchy when I have the thought that all Muslims are the same, all Jews are the same. It's exactly the same as what we're witnessing actually with what's going on in Middle East at the moment, in Israel. They're basically tarnishing the Jewish community of this country with the actions of the Israeli government, where I know full well I did not vote in any Israeli elections any more than you have done, unless, of course, there was time you might have done, but certainly not any recent ones. And as a result of it, I find it quite disconcerting the way that everyone is tarnished. So my point is, we need to distinguish the difference between fundamentalists and peace-loving Muslims who just want to integrate into British society. And there are plenty of Muslims who do maybe follow their faith, but want to integrate.
No, and you're right. And those people who brandish this Islamic fundamentalism, we'll call it what you like, are clearly giving, I don't like using the term moderate Muslims or individuals who adopt the Muslim faith, who have come here, who contribute.
I call them true Muslims.
Yeah,
that's what I'd say.
They contribute, they like their heritage here, the values, they believe in Britain. That's wonderful. And the actions of these other individuals
are hiding behind them.
Yes, well, the actions of these other individuals who basically want to ruin everything with hatred and God knows what, and they hate this country, are doing a disservice to their fellow Muslims, put it that way.
But that's what they're doing in the Middle East. This is exactly what we see on a daily basis in the Middle East, where you've got these fundamentalist lunatics who are hiding behind people of all walks, whether they are Iranian, whether they're Lebanese, whether they are people in the Gaza Strip, whoever it may be. They're all trying to hide behind individuals who happen to be Muslim, and they are saying, well, you know what, you're collateral damage. You can be the victims in Israel's crimes, because that will help us with our ultimate goal of eradicating Israel and the Jews from the world. And we know people are blind to it. They don't see what is going on. They tarnish everyone with the same brush. They say that potentially Muslims in the Middle East are victimised here and the Jews are bad. That's all they see.
No, you're right. But here's the thing. What I'm disappointed in is, let's take the Muslim Council of Great Britain or other Muslim institutional quasi-authorities. I really would like to hear, and I haven't, unless I am totally deaf or they're speaking very quietly, or it's a combination of both. I haven't heard one representative of some authority with a Muslim hat on it, if I could put it that way, and saying, this is awful, we don't agree with it, it should stop. There are interfaith communities, but I want to hear someone from the Muslim Council of Great Britain say, no, this isn't what we believe in, we don't want it. But I haven't.
I do hear what you're saying, but I do also believe that a lot of those people you refer to kind of live in fear as well of a great divide within their own community. And that may be what motivates, but I absolutely hear it. Very quickly, because unfortunately we're about to run out of time for this, but I do want to talk about what you have found here on, I believe this must be the front page of The Sun from Monday, and that is tank robbers. This is, of course, Britain being hit up by £100 million a year fill up and flee petrol station crimes, fleeing out of control. Well, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, very quickly, in the time we have, you know, I don't know if your viewers or listeners are aware, I'm sure they are, whether petrol costs £1, whether it costs £2 a litre, whatever, the fact is 45% of it is tax. And if this government had just one simple, straightforward policy without the 17 U-turns that we've had, if they really wanted to do something, they should slash the tax by at least 25 or 30 pence a litre. Show that you're doing something. And have you heard recently how much money ESSO have made.
I
It's
haven't,
billions.
but I'm afraid we're not necessarily going to get to hear it, Elliot, because we are absolutely out of time. But thank you so much. It's been an absolute treat to have you in the studio. Hope you'll come back and speak to us again very soon on Talk. Elliot Halpern, economic and political commentator. Right, coming up, it's Talk Back, your chance to have your say on the day's news. There's only one story in town. I want to know, how much trust do you have in the Prime Minister? 0344 499 1000. Get in touch and have your say. It's you, it's me, and we're going to hear a whole lot of opinions, I strongly suspect. This is Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and a very good morning to you. This is Talk Back. It's Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken with you until 1 o'clock this morning. And my goodness me, have we got a lot to talk about. Yes, indeed, there is only one story in town we know. That is, of course, about our esteemed Prime Minister, because yesterday afternoon, Sir Keir Starmer was accusing the Foreign Office officials of a deliberate attempt at covering up after, of course, it emerged that Lord Mandelson failed top-level security checks before his appointment as the US ambassador. Of course, the Prime Minister told MPs it was staggering that he was never informed that the vetting had been rejected, claiming the decision to withhold the files was an intentional act by the civil service. And of course, the row will only intensify today when former top official Sir Ollie Robbins faces a public grilling over why the recommendation was overruled in secret. That is what we're talking about. How much faith, or indeed trust, do you have in the Prime Minister? 0344 499 1000. This hour is dedicated to you. So let me hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Now, in just a moment's time, we're going to speak to Janice in Essex, who is on the line. But I just want to read a couple of messages just before we get to Janice. So Janice, stay right there. I'll be with you. And Keith here says, prior to the next general elections, two things needs to happen. If we have any chance of bringing the UK back to Great Britain, number one, any manifesto put forward at the election must be made a legally binding document, subject to challenge at the UK royal courts if not adhered to. This would obviously currently have to be implemented by Labour. Good luck with that. Number two, there would need to be a deep cleanse of the civil service. Those who have served multiple previous governments all seem to sever previous governments' plans. If this is not implemented, we will again suffer more years of the same non-delivery and headline news. Keith, I really struggle to answer that because, or to argue, I should say, with that. I answer it very clearly. I agree. I probably shouldn't, but I do, because I also think we need a jolly good clear out. I'm not actually sure I see any other way in which this country can get back on track if we're just going to have this endless cycle of nonsense. 0344 499 1000 if you want to drop a message on WhatsApp. And that's exactly what Dave has done, who says, we've had a phone ban here for over a year. He's in New Zealand, by the way, I should point out. And now the education and the behaviour, I beg your pardon, has improved. The problem is the left-wing schools don't implement spouting human rights. Dave, that's really interesting to hear that. The fact that actually now a country has tried and tested the theory of banning mobile phones and things have improved. There's a voice note here from Miles. Miles wants to have his say on Sir Keir Starmer. Miles.
Hi, Phil. I remember a Bob Marley song and it said, you can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all of the time. Now, I'm not being funny, but the whole country knew that Mandelson was the wrong appointment. It was all over the newspapers and everything else. How did Keir Starmer not know? But yet, he's trying to fool everybody as if he didn't know.
Well, Miles, I think we can all see right past it. That's the whole problem. That's why the Prime Minister is in a bit of a pickle, because the truth is, we're not stupid. Anyway, Janice, you've been waiting very patiently, so it has to be said. A very good morning to you, Janice, over there in Essex. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you so much for taking my call. It's the first time I've spoken to you.
Is it? So, well, one way or another, Janice. I'm not keeping tabs, but it's a great pleasure to speak to you all the same.
All right. Good line. Bob Marley song.
Yes.
What I really like to say is the fact that if we get rid of Starmer, which I can't stand, by the way, he's going to fight any way he can, blame anybody he can to get out of this mess. Because all that man wants to do is go and lord it all around the other country. Who are you going to have? God help us if we get Miliband or Larry.
Yeah, totally not. But you know what, Janice, this is the whole thing. This is kind of why I think, and so many others, kind of don't want Starmer to go, because the alternative could be so much worse. As I was sort of saying a little earlier on, it's talk about better the devil you know. Haven't we learnt our lesson? When everyone thought that Rishi Sunak was bad or Boris Johnson was bad.
He's great.
Yeah, I mean, haven't we learnt our lesson?
Even Boris was bad. But even he was better than this, wasn't he?
Well, I think so. But again, I mean, unfortunately, there are people who clearly didn't think that it was, which is why he was obviously booted out. But this is exactly my point. But realistically, this is exactly my point.
The Greens get in then.
Well,
that'll be even worse.
Well, I can't pretend that I'd be that thrilled.
We'll all have open doors. Everybody will have a house. Well, I can have mine if they like it. It's all falling apart. But
well, no, Janice, it's worse. Everyone will have everyone else's house because the property will all be redistributed, won't it? So.
Well, I think it is. I don't like what he's doing with our soldiers, but I think right now he's got to be the best that we've got.
Well, I agree totally, and that's the problem. But this is why it's so unbelievably depressing. Is because we know, most of us realise, that Starmer is the least worst option. Because, I'm sorry, but if you've got someone like David Lammy who can't... Well,
you've only got West Street, and that's all that's left.
Yeah, but...
And even he ain't that good.
Well, I was going to say, I don't think that I think there are many people who don't believe that West Streeting is that squeaky clean. I mean, I've got to be honest, I actually sort of did have the the opportunity to interview him once, and I'm going to level with you. I was fully prepared to dislike him just because I didn't really care for the fact that he was open to the idea of potentially giving doctors and nurses even more money if they went on strike. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they don't deserve it, but there are ways to manage the NHS, and I don't think just throwing more money at it is the way to do it. However, let's not get into that. I was fully prepared to dislike him, but actually when I did meet him, I've got to be honest, he was a very charming individual, and I did get on with him. So I can't really sort of too much have a go at him. But again, it doesn't be the best, but it doesn't mean that he's entirely innocent. For example, there are some views he has on the Middle East I don't care for at all. So I think we have to be very aware that there are plenty of people who are in government who, if they were to take over the leadership of the Labour Party and ultimately become the next Prime Minister, they're not actually better than what we have now. You know, I mean, part of me wonders whether or not Yvette Cooper would be a worse option. I'm not so sure. I don't know. I really don't think Angela Rayner would be.
More than I do, because you must know more of those people that are standing there. I mean, look at how many they've got on the backbenchers. Surely you can find someone.
Well, they should have enough choice somewhere. But yeah, look, Janice, you know what I was thinking as well is that I don't really remember a time when it felt like the country... I've always known the country's been going down a very slippery slope for a very long time, but I can't say I ever remember it feeling like it's been in this much of a mess.
Can I please say something?
Do you mind? I would love it if
I'm knocking 73 this year.
Well, you could have fooled me.
I can't wait to get off this planet. One degree.
Oh, no, come on.
For one reason. No, because I've never known my country to be in such a state. We are absolutely going down the pits. And I don't know who can save us. I don't even think it's Nigel.
Well, no, I mean, listen,
who can save us.
Well, so here's the thing, Janice. I don't want to cause any sense of depression or anything like that amongst us when I say this, but I agree with what you're saying. I think that sort of people are pinning a lot of hopes on other parties because we're in such a desperate situation. But what people have to remember is that it's not just a case of whoever is voted into power at the next general election that suddenly a magic wand is going to be waved and miraculously all the problems facing this country are going to be fixed. No, we are talking about years, if not decades, of repair work ahead of us. And that's only if they start repairing it
and you'll
today.
all have robots, by the way.
Yeah, thanks, great.
Flood you with robots.
Well, but Janice, I will say this, though. I do have hope. I do genuinely believe it is possible. But we've got to remember, it won't be a quick fix. No, you're very kind to say so. I wouldn't say young, but I appreciate you saying that all the same. But I think that we have to remember there won't be a quick. We have to remember there won't be a quick fix. But what I do believe is that there is the chance that if whoever is the next Prime Minister, whether it is after they succeed Sir Keir Starmer, or whether it be after another general election, whatever it might be, doesn't really matter. I believe if they systematically unpick the red tape that blockades and obfuscates all of the decisions made by this country and actually let us... Do what, sorry?
I said you're great, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think you're great as well, thank you. But if we actually get them unpicking all of the red tape that gets in the way of our sovereignty in this country and we actually start clawing back decision-making in the way it should have happened after Britain left the European Union, then...
Goodness. You won't, because we're going back in we're going back in the EU. He's going to tie us so
he might try.
I mean, how can you give away 12 years of fishing when the licences were coming up this year?
Yeah, but Janice, it goes
12 years.
But it goes on the basis, and this is what we've got to remember as well, it goes on the basis that the EU want us back. And I'm not so convinced that they would be willing to welcome us back with open arms. And even if they were, it wouldn't be a fast track. There are many other countries, if you like, who are stacked up in line to wait to join the EU anyway, such as Ukraine, such as Turkey. Technically they're ahead. What would happen if Britain was to suddenly jump the queue? Anyway, Janice, thank you so much for your call. It was really great to speak to you. I very much hope we will speak again very soon. 0344 499 1000 if you want to join in the discussion. That's exactly what Trevor, who is in Cheshire, has done. Trevor, very good morning to you.
Oh, hi, pal. I think you're a good presenter, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Gracious me. That's very flattering.
Channel, by the way.
You say again, sorry. I'm so sorry. I was so busy thanking you. I missed what you said.
I'm a working class lad, right?
Right.
And by the way, ex-3rd Battalion Parachute Regiment as well, right? So,
thank you for that.
You know what I think about my country, right? I looked at that thing today with Starmer shuffling his papers round like a lawyer. I'm going, you're out to your death, lad. You should not be in that position. Then I looked across that bench. We've got Diane Abbott, who, well, she can't add up, basically. It takes an hour to answer the question. Then I see the matey boy next to him, right, who pretends as a solicitor, but he's not a solicitor. You know what I mean? Then I look to the right of Starmer, and then I go, well, you're the woman who's ruining the economy.
But you know, Trevor, it would be funny if it wasn't so dreadfully serious. But I kind of find myself laughing out of nerves more than anything.
I've not even mentioned Lammy.
Oh, please don't.
just,
do you have to?
But you have to laugh at it through irony, don't you? Because you could not imagine a worse bunch of people running your country.
Well, you know what? It was Elliot Harpen who was reviewing the papers in the last hour. He made a very valid point. He said, are they actually running the country, though? I mean, I would argue they are running the country, but I think they're running the country into the ground. That's what I think. But in terms of running the country, a lot of people believe that the civils have far too much. Civil servants have way too much power. Local councils, obviously, as we know, also have a lot of power because they're basically successive governments now have sort of dished it away to them. That's before we even get into the idea of Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Assembly. You know what I mean? We have a lot of power that once was in Westminster redistributed around the country. And that's why everything, I think, feels so fragmented and so disjointed and so, just so broken.
And you know what, pal? From my perspective here, right, I don't give two monkeys. I just want what's best for my country.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
Totally. And you know what? I will say this. As much as I strongly disagreed with an awful lot of what Tony Blair did, at the very least, he was a good leader. You might not have agreed with everything he did, but he was a good leader. And it also felt like, by and large, he loved his country. And I think we only have to look and see how he has reacted to some of the things that the current Labour government's doing to know that he's not completely on their side with all of it.
Can I just tell you something, pal? They're a bunch of idiots. That's what they are.
Well, so here's the thing. I understand why people say that. Truly, I do. And especially when you've got someone like Lammy, who on Celebrity Mastermind couldn't even tell the difference between Marie Antoinette and Marie Curie. So I know what you're saying. But the truth is, I don't think anyone who winds up in Parliament is an idiot, but per se. But they do idiotic things.
By the way, such is his international knowledge, right? He went on Mastermind and made that basic. Honestly, and this is the same geezer who said, I've never seen no police in London, but the one was behind him under the bridge.
No, I know. It is mind-blowing. It's very, very disturbing, to say the least. And look, I've said it before, I'll say it again, right? I know that it comes across as that we're just sat here and bashing the Labour Party. I mean, look, it is kind of usual that whoever is the ruling party are subject to all sorts of criticism, let's be honest, because that's kind of how political stations like Talk and others work, is we have to criticise whoever is the party at the time. But this is more than that. It feels like it's more than that, because in the past, I've always felt that it was a case of bashing politicians' policies. Now, it feels like we have to have a go at the politicians themselves because they are so mind-numbingly horrendous as individuals. All of them. Literally, I can't think of a single MP who I would trust with my life. Truly.
I think the word incompetent comes to mind. And by the way, in my life, I'm 68 years old now, right? And I've seen lots of political views and colours and what have you. You know what I mean? I remember in the late 80s, my mortgage doubled and because of the exchange rate mechanism or what have you. I've seen it, honestly, in that respect. I've seen it, done that. But I just look at that bunch of idiots there today on that front bench, and I just go, you are a bunch of idiots. That's what I think. Just can't get over it.
Yeah, but this is it. And again, like I said right at the beginning of this, we kind of have to laugh out of nerves because I think it's all we've got, to be honest with you. I just can't understand how we've got ourselves in such a pickle, in such an unbelievable predicament, because we knew, right, all through the Conservative government, right, and the Conservative reign, if you like, last time around for 14 years. And by the way, Trevor, huge thanks for your call. 0344 499 1000 if you want to join in the conversation. But all the way through the last time that the Conservatives were in power, I think all of us were thinking, surely things can only get better. There's got to be someone somewhere who's going to improve this. Let's go back to Gordon Brown. Flipping heck. I mean, Gordon Brown might have been quite a savvy chancellor. To some, not everyone thought that, but I don't think he was the worst we've seen, that's for sure. But I didn't agree with some of the things he came up with. You know, I mean, certainly sort of selling off some of the precious metals of this country, to my mind, was a ludicrous policy. You know, I mean, if we were in that much trouble financially, then it's always the same thing. You have to ask yourself, where can I save money? You don't try and liquidate valuable assets in a bid to try and buy your way out of debt. You look at how you can make savings first and foremost, and clearly, you know, that was obviously a problem. But let's put that to one side. That was so long ago now. It almost feels like it's irrelevant to the discussion. We're talking about, obviously, the bank bailouts in 2008 during the most sensational crash that most of us would have seen in our lifetime. Was it the right thing to do? I'm not so convinced. You know, I believe that the banks don't have our best interest at heart, no pun intended, ever since then. Let's not forget the taxpayers bailed them out, and yet people are struggling to get mortgages now. People are struggling to get loans. People are penalised if they go into overdraft that's unagreed. All of these different ways in which the banks will basically pay us back, or rather not pay us back, for how we, the taxpayers, bailed them out. That was a decision that has been made within the last 20 years that has completely and utterly shattered our economy. There are so many examples over the last couple of decades of decisions taken by government who clearly think, at surface value anyway, that they've got the British people, I should say, interest at heart. Well, you could have fooled me. If they do, they hide it very well. But now it's brazen. Those examples I've just cited are examples of policies that we could lambast. Now we don't even talk about the policy, not really. We talk about the individuals. We talk about how well or badly Kemi Badenoch is performing as leader of the opposition. What policy do you know that the Conservatives will implement in the next election if they were brought back to power? Because off the top of my head, I can't really think of any. I know they've sort of said sound bites here and there, but I can't really think of any defining policies that would revolutionise this country. If anything, I think of it as undoing some of the damage that they've done over the years. But with Labour, what policy have they implemented since coming to power? They've suggested several, but so many of them have been U-turns that they've not even really implemented what they said they would do. The only one that I can think of straight away is over the winter fuel allowance, but of course that turned out to be a bit of a U-turn in the end anyway when they gave it back to certain pensioners. I think that if we think of the way that they gave pay rises to the train unions when they were striking, you remember that? All of these examples that we can think of, most of those apart from obviously the pay rise to the train drivers, has been U-turned. What have they actually done since they came to power, apart from cause a lot of misery for people? Where has this country gone wrong, seriously? So embarrassing. Get involved in the conversation. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. I'd love to hear from you. We're going to speak to Cliff, who's in Kidderminster, in just a moment's time. But you can also join in the conversation. We'll read some of your messages as well, by the way. 87222. Start your message with the word talk if you want to text. And if you want to send a WhatsApp, it's 0344 499 1000. That's also for, of course, a traditional text-style WhatsApp message or a voice note. This is Phil Dave, in for Petrie Hosken, with you until 1 a.m. And this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. It's Talk Back with Phil Dave, in for Petrie Hosken, with you until 1 o'clock this morning. Cliff in Kidderminster has been waiting very patiently to have his say. So let's say a very good morning to you, Cliff. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Phil. I'm fine, thank you.
Excellent. What have you got to tell me?
Right, what I wanted to say, that I think that if I was in Starmer's boots when all this business with Mandelson kicked off months ago, I would be straight on the phone to the chief of MI6 and ask, has he got clearance or hasn't he? What the reasons were is maybe irrelevant. It's whether he's passed or not. And he shouldn't have gone forward with it unless he knew that.
I think the problem is, Cliff, that one way or another, the Prime Minister has clearly, somewhere along the line, made the most dreadful mistake. Now, the fact that he has said, at least, and we've got to give credit where it is due, I suppose, he has said that he realises he shouldn't have appointed Mandelson. But at the same time, I think the fact is he tried, you know? I can't believe it took him to this point, to today, yesterday now, obviously, to say, I probably shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have appointed Mandelson. How did he not know?
Absolutely.
I just can't believe it, because at the very least, doesn't he read the newspapers?
Well, that's right. I mean, it's just common knowledge, I would say, and he's guilty by default of not finding out and not realising, just going around with his fingers in his ears. He's spending too much time fiddling around with things that he's done nothing that he said he was going to do in the manifesto, like growth, smashing the gangs. Wants to bring in his pet digital ID.
Oh, get me started on that.
And everything, and all the things he said he was going to do, hasn't done, just moved on to something else. And basically, whatever he touches turns to dust. No respect, no confidence in the man whatsoever.
Cliff, can I ask you something that you don't necessarily have to answer, but I just wondered, when you make a mistake, and none of us are perfect, you know, I think everyone can admit that we've made mistakes in this life, and I certainly have. When you make a mistake, how do you react to it? Do you normally hold your hands up to it and say, yeah, I shouldn't have done that, oops? Or do you deflect? Do you say, no, it wasn't me, it was someone else?
Certainly not. You have to own up. You get more credibility. Well, it's a loss. You limit the problems by owning up sooner rather than later, and to just prolong it, he's just making an absolute fool of himself and taking us all for making us think we're all mugs.
Oh, he does, and I've said this a few times on the show. I truly believe that it's not just Starmer. I think it's the political class of this country believe that we are all stupid. I think they believe that we can't see right through them, that we don't know what they're up to, that we don't understand everything, and therefore, that's all right. They're just nasty little citizens. They'll just do as they're told. Now, I don't want to encourage any sort of action of any description because I don't believe in violence. I never have done and never will do. But I only think to myself that there is so much that the British public can take before there is something pretty nasty that happens, because how much longer do we have to tolerate being treated like Muppets?
Well, that's right. Couldn't agree with you more. And as I think other contributors have said this evening, the present government, none of them have got any idea about running a business, profit and loss accounts, and all that sort of thing. We've run a small business for high-tech business for coming up to 40 years.
Wow.
But it's despite of this government, and it's making it more difficult, certainly with engineering, manufacturing, they and previous governments and the EU have deindustrialised our country, and that's something for the Ramoners to think about, that we haven't got a lot of industry left, certainly not in the engineering sector from my experience. I used to go all over the country. We still do, but it's very isolated pockets of industry that still exists.
No, but again, I mean, successive governments have given that away, and that is that when people... All right, so I mean, I'm obviously not going to teach you to suck eggs here, but it always amuses me when people say that it's successive governments have given it away. People genuinely believe it's actually the governments who've done it. No, the reason why the governments have done it is because of the policies they've implemented, making it almost impossible or unbearable for businesses to live, work and function in the UK. And therefore, a lot of it, they just say, well, it's a lot cheaper to import what we're doing, say, from China and other countries that obviously can produce the same goods at a much cheaper price. And therefore, we don't really want to deal with the British companies that manufacture all of these bits and pieces. So that's how they've given it away over the years. And that's before we even talk about the kind of rates they've shoved on top of small businesses and how they've made it almost just unbearable to manage a business.
Yes, and something that a pet hate of mine, I attended in the early 90s a seminar. There was a lady from the Department of Trade and Industry promoting joint venture grants for manufacturing companies for those countries waiting to join the European community, i.e. Czechoslovakia, Poland, Hungary, those sort of places. They would get priority. Existing members wouldn't stand much chance. But if you chose Czechoslovakia, Poland, Hungary, there was hundreds of millions of euros available. And I've seen and I've been involved through our customers moving high-tech equipment, machine tools and manufacturing facilities out to Czechoslovakia, Poland and Hungary, and even Turkey, who never actually joined the EU. Sorry, I'm drifting off the point a bit here, aren't I?
Quite all right. That's exactly what Talkback is all about. You are entitled to your thoughts. But Cliff, just before I let you go, just answer for me the one question. How much trust do you have in Sir Keir Starmer?
Absolutely zero.
Oh dear. Cliff, thank you very much indeed for calling us from Kidderminster. 0344 499 1000. I'm actually determined, truly I am, if you are one of the people out there who does have trust in the Prime Minister, please don't think that the only option is to call up and to bash him. I want to hear from you. I want to understand why you trust the Prime Minister just as much as I want to understand why someone doesn't trust the Prime Minister. But that is my question to you. How much trust do you have in Sir Keir Starmer? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk, where your opinion matters. Get in touch.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. It's Phil Dave here in for Petrie Hosken with you until 1 o'clock this morning. It is not too late to have your say on talkback this evening. If you would like to get in touch, feel free to do so. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. I would love to hear from you. Give us a call. Have your say. How much trust do you have in the Prime Minister? As I said before the break, I would like to hear from you in particular if you do still trust him. If you think people are being terribly unfair and attacking him unnecessarily, then I want to hear from you in particular, because all opinions matter. And it's essential that we hear all opinions. That's how good debate is had. I certainly don't want this to be an echo chamber, but I would be lying if I didn't tell you I have struggled this evening to find anyone who seems to trust the Prime Minister. Do you? 0344 499 1000. That's the telephone number you need to give us a call on. You can also send a WhatsApp, by the way, to that number as well. And also you can send a WhatsApp voice note to the same number. Text 87222, start your message with the word talk. And indeed, you can also contact us via social media. I've got to be honest with you, actually. Social media, I'm a bit off social media. When I sort of did a couple of shows over Christmas New Year on Talk, and I sort of said it then, that something happened along the lines in 2025 where I just thought enough is enough and I can't do social media anymore. So you can tweet at talkTV if you want, but to tell you the truth, it's much better to either call or to send a WhatsApp or a text. Danielle says, Phil, you're terrible at taking compliments. You're right, I am. I always have been. I'm afraid, Danielle, you're absolutely right. Enjoy them. Well, that's very kind of you. She says, I never thought I'd ever agree with Diane Abbott. I did today. And Danielle, I can't believe I'm saying this. I really, you know, there are these moments where you just know in your career something's going to be clipped of you saying something. It's going to be used and weaponized against you. I've got a horrible feeling that this might be one of those moments, but maybe, possibly, I agreed with Diane Abbott today as well. But anyway, there you go. I don't normally, but yes, I might have done today. Danielle, you also go on to say in your message, hello to Adam, but I'm going to level with you. You've stumped me. I don't know who Adam is. And I've asked the team and they don't know who Adam is. When you say hello to Adam, but if you're saying, oh, I know who you mean. You mean producer Adam. Sorry, it's just dawned on me who you're talking about. Yes, very good. Thank you. I'll pass on your hello to him. Anyway, Danielle, thank you very much indeed for your message. Much appreciated. 0344 499 1000. How much trust do you have in Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister? That's the question. And it's a question that Heather in Gavan is going to answer for us, hopefully. Heather, a very good morning to you.
Talk about mistakes and consequences. He cannot face any consequences at all for his action. He's too busy firing other people for his own stupidity and mistake and for misleading Parliament in the House of Commons.
Yes, but he denies misleading the Parliament. But anyway, I mean, what I will say... Heather, come on, we're going to have a conversation, not going to have a rant. But what I do want to talk to you about is, in particular, let's look at that very point about passing the blame, because I agree. I see this all the time. I think that what Starmer tends to do time after time is he'll say, don't look at me, look over there. And deflecting, to my mind, is cowardly. I don't like that.
I like people to be honest and be truthful. Do you?
I'd say that is a fairly important fundamental of basic human behaviour, yes.
It's not. The basic fundamental thing about being a politician is telling the truth.
Well, you'd like to think so, but I mean, look, I don't think that it is any hidden secret that politicians have been synonymous with bending the truth in the past. Now, I'm not suggesting that is what Starmer has done in this instance, by the way. Let me be very clear about that.
It's about time we stop this. Stop making excuses for him, because that's what it seems like to me.
No. He'll make excuses. He'll make excuses of his own accord. So don't need to worry about that. And by the way, Danielle's just messaged to say...
I'm not making no excuses for him. I do not believe making excuses for anybody for their indiscretions and misleading.
Heather, well, hang on. Like I said, he denies misleading. I'm not saying for a second that we need to make excuses for the Prime Minister for any action that he may or may not have carried out. Heather, come on, conversation here, not ranting. I'm not saying we need to make excuses for him by any stretch of the imagination. I'm perfectly sure that the Prime Minister is capable of making his own excuses. What I'm saying is I do not appreciate the way that he and so many other politicians that we seem to be lumbered with in this day and age are constantly deflecting. And we can look at this on a much bigger scale. Let's look at the way in which, whenever there is a question over policy from the opposition to anyone on the front bench, whether it is the Prime Minister, whether it is the Chancellor, Home Secretary, whoever it is, doesn't matter. They all do the same thing. They all say, well, because of the mess that they left us with, because of what they did, this, that, and the other, this is why this government has to... And you know what? It's just getting really tiring. Why can't any of our politicians just take a bit of responsibility?
Exactly. Because do you remember when Keir Starmer was the leader of the opposition, where, do you remember COVID and the Partygate with Boris Johnson?
Absolutely. And of course, let's not forget Starmer was caught up in his own
that Boris
debacle.
Johnson was misleading Parliament in that. How is it that is so different of him saying that and saying, oh, he must resign, and he did resign to Boris Johnson. He did get suspended. Well, it seems that same appliance should go to Keir Starmer as well.
Well, if he is indeed proven to have misled Parliament, then yes, but as things stand, he denies that he's done that.
Well, it's about time we need to get the proof right now, because we are getting sick and tired of being... It seems to be one huge cover-up. We seem to have...
Well, that might be your opinion, but...
upon cover-ups in the whole entire systems.
Well, no, I think that what we can agree on is that I think cover-up is a strong word per se, but at the same time, I think we can agree that it would appear as though that there are some people in the ranks, whether that is the Prime Minister, I don't know, but there are some people who appear somewhere on the line to think that the truth is optional. I think the British public deserve, from all walks of life, whether it is politicians, whether it is civil servants, whoever it is, we deserve the truth. It's just as simple as that. Heather, thank you very much indeed for your call. I really do appreciate it. 0344 499 1000 if you want to join in the conversation. And that's also the same number, by the way, that you send a voice note to. I'm pleased to say that Ian has done just that. So why not let's have a little listen to what Ian has to say.
Good morning. This is Ian from Felton. I think the Starmer issue is a case of be careful what you wish for. Everybody wanted him. He was the one to get rid of poor old Jeremy Corbyn. He's the one who stuffed Jeremy Corbyn in the back. And now look what you've got. And it's not a case of Starmer. It's a case of the whole political class, whatever party. So now you've got what you wanted. So I think you should all suck it up.
Well, I dare say there is truth in that, Ian. And as I said before, I believe that there is this desperation to get rid of the Conservatives after their 14 years in power the last time around, that people just sort of either stayed away from the ballots or they just voted to get rid of them. And sure enough, it looks like we've been lumbered with something that's, if not as bad, possibly worse. Who knows? But look, there'll be plenty out there who, I dare say, think it's a heck of a lot better. I just wished I knew who they were. 0344 499 1000 is the phone number to get involved in the conversation if you would like. And by the way, Danielle has messaged back, and sure enough, to clarify that she did indeed mean producer Adam when she said hello to Adam before. So I'm sorry, I will absolutely pass on your greetings to Adam when I next see him. Right, coming up in just a moment's time, we're going to hear the thoughts of Jerry, who's in Burton-on-Trent. So, Jerry, don't go anywhere. We'll have a chat with you, and we'll hopefully have a chat with you as well. 0344 499 1000. Get in touch. There's still time. I want to have a natter with you. This is Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken with you until 1 o'clock. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you. This is the final part of this morning's edition of Talkback. It's Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken with you until 1 o'clock this morning. Thank you very much for all of your messages, by the way, and your calls. Much appreciated. Still got time for a couple more. Waiting very patiently on the line is Jerry, who's in Burton-on-Trent. Jerry, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Phil. And could I just say what an excellent station with such a good range of presenters. Really, really quality people, you know, well-measured and well-reasoned and thinking people. It's really excellent, and you're certainly no exception. So thanks for being there for us, good man.
That's terribly kind of you, Jerry. And as I've said before, when people have tried to pay me compliments, my head does have to fit through the door after when I leave. So you're very kind. But let's instead, which is much more important, talk about what you would like to speak about. So what felt necessary enough to give us a call?
You know, it's a funny thing, the blob, isn't it, and everything else. But when you think that someone like Amber Rudd, which is probably a bit of a one-off, you know, I think she was in the Home Office at the time, and she'd been misled by her civil service colleagues into providing false information to the House. Purely on that basis alone, without any kind of sitting firm or passing the buck or anything like that. And we all know the Home Office is a dodgy old department at the best of times. So
I'm sure that the Home Office would argue otherwise, but yes, I can understand why some people think that, yes.
Yeah, well, it certainly had its issues, and I think it remains, you know, one of those rather strangely autonomous bodies. But nonetheless, she said, well, I've misled the House and I'll be resigning. Yeah. And there was no big issue about it.
No, well, you know why? Is because technically she did the right thing. She realised she was in charge of that department. She realised that it went horribly wrong, and she said, that's it. I can't stay here. My position's untenable, because she did the decent thing. And I have to tell you, I mean, I actually remember at the time when Amber Rudd stood down, feeling quite deflated, because she was one of the few Conservatives who I thought actually was more conservative. And as you may have gathered, I sort of have a slightly more of a leaning towards... look, let me put it this way. I've always said I feel very partyless, because economically I believe more in conservative values, but then humanitarian-wise I believe more in liberal values, if you see what I mean. So it's very tricky. I was one of the rare people who saw merit in the Conservative and Liberal coalition in 2010. And there are not many people who say that out loud, believe me. But the point being is that she clearly knew she had to fall on her sword, but it feels as though we've come a long way since and it wasn't that long ago Amber Rudd was in government.
Absolutely. And the thing about it, Phil, is that I think we should be brave enough and bold enough to say, irrespective of what party colour we support and, you know, about the individual, any MP that becomes Minister or Prime Minister should have those principles. And if we contrast that with Starmer's situation today, and you think, well, did you mislead the House? And he admits to doing so. And you think, well, with you know, moral compass in your direction of travel compared to Amber Rudd's. But
I should suggest pointing in a very different direction. Look, I mean, I sort of, again, I can't help but laugh out of nerves, because it is a nerve-wracking time. You know, I think we always look to the leaders of this country, or so-called leaders of this country, to provide us with some sort of stability. You know, a firm hand on the proverbial rudder when things seem a bit shaky. And things seem really shaky at the moment. You know, we've got all of this situation flaring up all over the world with different conflicts that we're not immune from by any stretch of the imagination. We already know that the Iranian regime can't stand the West. And no amount of holding hands up saying, well, we're not starting this war, we're innocent. No, that's not going to get you off the hook. The Iranian regime don't like us. They're going for Israel and America first. But believe me, they're going to come for the rest of the West afterwards if they actually do succeed in getting through Israel and America, which they won't, by the way. But it doesn't mean we're immune from that. Look at what's going on with Russia, Ukraine, and to anyone who says that doesn't affect us, well, oh yes, it flipping well does. How much money are we hoofing out to Ukrainians to help them in their efforts? And again, let us not forget that Russia is not exactly our #1 fan. So all of this stuff that's going on, and yet over here, our politicians seemed a little hell-bent on two-tier policing. Well, certainly that's what it seems at surface value. I'm sure they would argue otherwise. And they were also hell-bent on telling us who can and can't use a certain toilet. And I'm sorry, but I want politicians to lead. I want them to guide this country through an incredibly choppy patch.
Yeah, I think it's been said many a presenter talk that they're like a bunch of university students just lobbying for special causes where they think they can rally around some ideological opinion rather than running the country. And you think, goodness me. And you know, the lovely terms, honourable, right honourable gentleman, and you think, well, those labels don't fit one little bit.
As we know, they are obsessed with labels.
Oh, goodness.
Just sadly, the labels don't appear to apply to those who they're intending them for. Again, a laugh out of nerves. I can't help it. It's just terrible. Do you know what, Jerry? It's been a real treat to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed for calling. I do hope we'll speak again very soon. 0344 499 1000 if you want to join in the conversation. There's a message here that's come from Catherine who says, hey, Dave. You can call me Phil if you'd rather. Starmer was deliberately kept in the dark because he asked them to keep him in the dark. We don't know that. He knows, and it's all about whether it can be proven or not. He is a lawyer. and all he's interested in is winning. Like I mentioned, he runs his life and Parliament like it's a law case and has no interest in the country. He's there for his own ideology only. And you say some very flashing words afterwards, which I'm not going to repeat because I find it really quite embarrassing. But anyway, you're very kind to say it all the same. 0344 499 1000. If you want to send a WhatsApp note, you can also text 87222, start your message with the word talk. Speaking of calling, final call of the evening must go to Dave, who's over in Essex. Dave, a very good morning.
Hello, Phil.
How are you doing, Dave? Are you okay? We haven't spoken for ages.
Oh, I haven't spoken to you for quite a while.
No. Well, it's very nice to hear from you, and it's even more of an honour to speak to you on air, because normally I used to speak to you off air.
Yeah, I'm still here.
You're still here? Well, that's what I want. Yeah. I'm very pleased to hear it.
And you?
How's the good lady?
She's fine. She's fine. She's laying on the sofa at the moment.
Good God, you gracious.
I normally have her out chopping wood at this time of night.
Dear. Anyway, Dave in Essex, it's a great treat to speak to you. What did you want to say?
I have never in all my life, I'm 78 now, I've never in all my life known a more disloyal Prime Minister. He has no honour, he has no love for the British people or for this country. I can't hardly find words for him.
No, and do you know what? I'm not normally one who's lost for words either. I'm sure this comes as a massive shock. But even I have really been a bit, I think in the true sense of the word, gobsmacked by what we've witnessed yesterday in Parliament and actually why it's even a thing. Those hours, those endless hours that the Prime Minister of this country had to defend what he may or may not have known about an appointment of someone who is clearly so unbelievably bad for the country, both in image and in action. And yet, that's what happened in the home of the greatest democracy of the world, apparently. That's what happened.
Well, if we was democratic, he wouldn't go against the referendum, would he? And try and get us back in the EU. That's democracy. Democracy got us out of the EU.
Well, yes, you'd like to think so. But, I mean, I think, of course, there are some who would argue that we haven't actually sort of properly left the European Union anyway, which is one of the reasons why it's been such a mess since Brexit allegedly took place. But look, we can go over that, Dave, as much as we want. I have got a horrible feeling I know the answer to this question, so I don't want to be too preemptive. But my question, of course, that I've been asking everyone is how much trust do you have in the Prime Minister? Dave, give us a flavour. How much trust do you have in him?
I have no trust whatsoever. Minus 000.
Well, that's almost as good mathematics as Rachel Reeves. Dave, thank you so much. Truly, it was a real treat, and I'm very sorry it was a rushed call, but I'm here tomorrow evening and Wednesday evening as well in for Petrie, which is a great honour for me. So very much hope we will speak again. But 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number that you need to make a note of, because regardless of whether or not you can speak to us on this show, you must also continue to have your say throughout the day here on Talk. That is pretty much all we've got time for this evening. I do want to quickly read out this message from Julie, though, who says, "Good morning, Mr. Dave." Well, thank you for saying Mr. Dave. It's very kind. You just call me Phil, it's fine. Well done to you for stepping up and covering the Late Show. Thank you very much. It's very kind. I have full trust in the hollow-headed wooden-top Starmer to continue to make us and the world. I haven't quite read it. Make us a laughing stock to the world. Okay, fair enough. That would teach me not reading this through first.